everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the MinnMax Show, a place about games, friends, getting better. I'm joined by Jacob Geller.
Hello.
I'm joined by Janet Garcia.
Hello.
And joined by Suriel Vazquez.
Hello.
Welcome back to the podcast, dude.
It's just as I left it.
Nothing's changed. What is it? So if you're new, not you, Suriel, you're new every day when you open your beautiful eyes. But if you're new to MinnMax, Suriel was here from the beginning of MinnMax, and then at a certain point stepped away to start working in the world of game development, and I guess it was kind of consulting for that pocket before then and all that fun stuff. But we're here to figure out what's going on with Suriel now. But how often do you look at MinnMax Suriel and you're like, what is going on over there? Like, what? I thought I knew everything about that outlet for a little while, and now does it feel like the same outlet to you when you look at it from the outside, or when you dabble back in the fences every once in a while here?
I mostly keep up with the podcasts. I think that's where I spend most, because I don't watch a ton of YouTube at this point, which is weird to say, but yeah, I feel like I have to be more selective about podcasts, because I don't have a ton of time to listen to them anymore.
Oh.
So it's always like I have to go on a case-by-case basis of like, is the header catching my attention?
Okay.
Which I have to do a lot for like the daily podcasts. So things that are like news bound of like, okay, I don't like, that's not an interesting thing. I don't necessarily want to hear that, or it's too much. So I do have to choose every once in a while, but I feel like that's the most enthralling thing you could have said to Ben, a man who is singularly obsessed with the header and the title of each podcast.
I am, and I see those numbers vary every week, and it is such a fun challenge, because I feel like, there's some range for MinnMax show episode qualities, if I may say that on my own, but it's like sometimes there's a great episode that just the headline isn't quite there, and it shows in the numbers, and it kills me. It's like, God, if we just had 3 different words in there, people would have clicked on that, and that's the type of thing that will keep me up at night.
I think for me, it's like it can kind of oscillate one way or the other, where like, okay, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I'm not going to play that game for a little while. I'm like way behind on games.
Right.
I don't want to hear about it. Versus you would think like it would be the number one thing I want to hear about. But it's like, I want to hear people talk about like Balatro, right? Because even though I haven't played it, because it's
good
one
news.
Of those, yeah. So like it like having a prominent game in your headline can also be kind of a thing that people want to avoid. So it's like SEO one way or the other is kind of weird. So I don't know. Just name it whatever you think is most exciting, and don't worry about like, is this going to pop off.
Yeah, I hope SEO isn't SOL. But hey, on this episode of the podcast, we're talking about Suriel's big announcement, which should be fun. Then we're going to talk about the Xbox partner preview that happened on Wednesday, where Microsoft said, hey, these aren't Microsoft games, but here's some third-party games that look cool. And I'm curious to hear what this group thought about those batch of games. Then we're going to be talking about, I'm sorry, Suriel, you can cover your ears, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We're just going to touch on that a little bit here. Yeah. I'm sorry, I meant Balatro. What was I thinking? Yeah, it's just Balatro. Cool. Then we're going to talk about No Rest for the Wicked, which is the new action RPG from the studio that made the Ori games. I'm very excited to talk about a game called Astro Duel 2, and then some other odds and ends, with all due respect, but odds and ends. And then back half of the show, we have some wonderful questions that the community submitted over there on Patreon. Hey, Suriel Vazquez, what's this I see about you announced the game you're working on?
Yeah, so for background, I'm a narrative designer at Big Blue Sky Games, and on Tuesday we announced our first game, Merchants of Rosewall.
Hey!
Hey, thank you.
Please, Suriel, just bask in it. Just bask, please, for a little while.
I'll clap for me.
That's not basking.
I mean, which is to say that like I could not have been less involved with the announcement of this game. That we have a PR team who did a ton of like work to make sure that went as well as possible. Shout out to Kate and Aaron. But yeah, it's interesting to see like an announcement from the other side of it, and kind of following along with like what people are saying about it, and seeing previews and stuff, and seeing our Discord start to get populated with people who aren't like friends and family.
That's the thing. Okay, so Big Blue Sky Games, they had an open Discord before, but just it was like,
Well, it was mostly private for a while, and then we kind of did like a slow like invite people kind of thing.
Okay.
And then now it's kind of a thing that you can just join if you've seen the announcement trailer.
Yeah. How do you feel? Look within your soul. The announcement of the first game that you're writing for here. How are you feeling about Merchants of Rosewall being out there, at least for the announcement?
It makes me extremely nervous. Just because like I've, So the thing that I've done on this game is I started as a game writer. So I just wrote a lot of like the dialogue and story for the characters. And so as I kind of progressed, we all kind of agreed that like my role is more narrative design, where so like the difference being a game writer would just write, where fill in the boxes where text goes. And a narrative designer, like this is obviously depends on the studio, but I'm figuring out where those text boxes are going. Right. So my role is kind of grew as I was in the project. And so now I kind of grew to be like, I'm responsible for the story of this game.
Yeah.
Even though I was using, backgrounds and characters and world setup that other people, like our other narrative pro Tomkus, like he had already had like, here's the overall arc of the story. Here's the world. Here's the characters. And then I was kind of supposed to be filling in dialogue, but eventually it became like, well, with these pieces, write a story.
Right.
And so now seeing things about like, promotional materials of like, this is the world that we've imagined. And we want this to be different from other fantasy games. And like knowing both at once that like, yeah, that's what we're doing. And also now I have to live up to that, like that of the promises that we have made as a studio is like one of those things where like, I need to now deliver. And, I say this as I'm editing like all of these scripts and stuff that are like, well, better do a good job.
Not to freak you out any more than you already are, because for people that are just listening to the audio version, he's quivering in his chair right now. No, but it's a fascinating thing because the overall structure of the game, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's like you're running a shop and then customers are coming through in a fantasy setting and you're kind of getting to know the customers and the larger stories that are unfolding about the world from that, right? And so like that premise is like, well, that's a very writer heavy game.
Yeah. And so like, figuring out like how to write different voices so that all the characters don't sound the same. And then like finding your space within that as like a fantasy character. Like you can't, like there are certain kinds of modes of speaking that you don't want to use, but you also don't want to have like everyone sounds like the same jokey kind of like know too much about like, fantasy tropes thing.
Right.
And so finding different voices for characters without like relying on the same kind of tropes that people use is definitely hard, especially when you're writing characters who look distinct but all sound the same. So you don't want that to really do much. And so finding characters that are interesting and making sure that, like one of the things you do is you hire companions, right? You hire people to work at your workshop, and those people have to feel distinct. And a lot of the, like the small, let's say the lowest tier of Yakuza's side quest is kind of about those people, is like making sure that they have an arc for like, okay, I want to do this thing, and you help them accomplish it, and then there's a finality to that, right?
Yeah.
Writing, one for every possible companion that you can have in the game has been one of the larger lists narratively. That's a game dev term, is when you use the term lift to say it's going to be a lot of work. And so, finding ways to tell all these little stories that factor into, like the overall kind of themes of the game, which is like about work and how that, like what our relationship to work is within a fantasy world where, this is like, let's say post-conflict, where like this is not about orcs going to war with elves. This is about what happens after that kind of stuff happens.
Perfect.
Right? Like this is in the downtime between those kinds of major events. And so, it's been a fun challenge, and like the team has been, super welcoming, because it's kind of split between people who have worked in AAA before and people who have never worked in game dev, like myself. And so there's a lot of mentoring going on, which is, pretty rare in video games nowadays. And so, everyone really trusted me to like write a good story and have been helping me with like, okay, how do I turn this into code that fits into a video game and not just a Word doc?
Right.
Everyone's been really helpful there.
That's bizarre. Is it, since you've wanted to write a game for a long time, I presume, fair to say your entire life?
I mean, I didn't go into a career path where I thought, like, I didn't go into Games Press, for example, to like, eventually I'll land a games dev job.
Yeah, but you were writing like Smash Brothers fan fiction as a kid and stuff,
that's
which
true.
feels
I
like
was
that's
definitely,
kinda...
I never met Soccer, but I really feel like I could have sold him on it.
Yeah,
I wanted to write books for a long time and write fiction and stuff. And then like eventually, as I got more familiar with like coding and game dev, it's like, a lot of the stories that I was telling myself in my head were like in the around the like, what's a cool story I can tell through a video game mechanic?
Yeah.
And so, like it's been a fun kind of transition of like, well, now you actually get to do that. How, better pay off,
Yeah. Is it as satisfying as we all hope it is, and you hoped it would be, to dive in and be like, all right, pressure's on, start writing there, chump.
I mean, I'm still in that mode. Like it's I don't know whether this is good or not yet. So like I have some amount of like pride in like the writing that I've done, and there are certain like scenes that I wrote that's like, yeah, that really hit.
Yeah.
But I'm not at the point, like I'm still kind of in the sprint mode where I haven't stopped running and feel like, okay, good. I feel satisfied with what I've done yet. So it's all, hopefully that'll come later, right? And I'll feel good about the work that that I've done. But I'm still kind of in the like, I don't have time to worry about what I think of the work I'm doing because there's just so much other work to do.
Oh my God.
Q3 2024 for Merchants of Rosewall.
Yeah, I can say things like wishlist us on Steam now because we have a Steam page.
Nice, congratulations, man.
Yeah.
Jacob, Janet, you ever want to write a game?
No.
I don't have like it's not on my list, but I could see it getting on my list.
Really?
I guess
That's
I'm kind of interested, yeah, like in doing that. But I see that more as a hobbyist thing than a career thing.
Yeah.
For me, at this point in my life.
I could see I maybe would like to be involved in something that the MinnMax cohorts would argue is not a game, such as Atari 50, or it's like I think being involved in the writing of like a documentary game would be really neat, and because I don't want to write fiction, but I do think I'm pretty good at writing kind of creative nonfiction, which is like what I do on my channel.
I would hope that we talk about a documentary game later on this episode, Jacob Keller. Wouldn't that be fun?
There's no way to know.
Who can say? Suriel, congratulations again. Anything else you want to get off your chest about Merchants of Rosewall before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, like it's a cozy game. I can say that, and that it's a game that like it's a part shop sim game, but it's also got like some story surprises. I would say that I'm really happy with. But yeah, if you're looking for a shop sim, and it's on PC now, but who knows where else it might end up. But yeah, thanks for having me, and check it out.
Okay, bye, Suriel. Thanks for being here.
Okay, yeah.
No, he's still
I'm leaving the park.
No. Suriel, did you watch that the Xbox stuff?
I did. I watched. It was like 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, the partner preview, that whole thing. So this was them showing off games, a bunch of third-party games. We streamed a reaction. You can watch Leo and Haley and I react to this whole thing. But I guess, Janet, Jacob, how are you feeling about that overall presentation here?
I feel like the first 3 games they showed were really cool.
Yes.
And so
I was gonna say the same thing.
So that it's like I didn't even care that a lot of the other ones kind of did nothing for me, because like they started off unexpectedly hot, and I just kind of like had a positive impression from there onward.
Yeah, it was a wild amount of new IP, like looking at the new list. And even if they're squeezing in some monster truck racing game, which looks fun, no doubt, like in the middle of it, like getting out of the gate strong and then ending with that new Capcom game. Like I really loved it just as like a zero expectations little Xbox presentation. I thought it was great, but
yeah, like I thought the opening was really strong. Admittedly, I came in like right at the end of the Unknown 9 trailer, so like rewatching that later made for like a weird machete cut specific to myself. But like Sleight of Hand looked cool, like the altar, like I was really enjoying, I think, the general pacing of not just cool ideas, but every game being in a distinctly different genre, at least like in the way that they ordered them. Because I think that's an issue that a lot of these showcases, especially like the sort of lower hype showcases of like third party stuff, like like sometimes it becomes too samey. They all blur together. You start to think, oh my God, how many times have we gone to space? Are you going to pull it off? I don't think so, and it kind of starts to become really negative. But I feel like it was so fun seeing that initial variety. And then it did kind of dip down at a certain point. And then kind of like was like, oh, I like Zhao, and I've seen Zhao already, but like it's cool them seeing it again. So it was a bit mixed for me at the end. But I thought, I feel like a showcase like this, for me personally, if I can leave with like 2 to 3 things that I'm now excited for, I feel like that's a dub, for like what it is. And this is what that was. Yeah,
I'm totally with you. Am I alone in thinking the Altars was the coolest game during this event?
I think it was the coolest game.
Okay.
It definitely had like, it had the best premise to explain, where they just kept saying things and I was like, yes, oh boy.
It's only getting better.
I don't know how playing that game will be, but I'm
scared to play that game.
Hearing the concept explained.
Yeah, where it started out, it's like, okay, you're on an alien world, looks a little Death Stranding-y, just wandering around this environment. And it's from the developers of This War of Mine and Frostpunk, 11-bit, which 11-bit was like developing or publishing at least 3 games in this presentation. Like they were all over the place. It seems like the year for 11-bit here. But so you're wandering around this alien planet, some Returnal vibes in there as well. And then it kind of circles back around for having more Returnal vibes, because the idea with the altars is you are on this strange alien planet and you're in an awesome looking vehicle, which we can talk about later. And in order to get this done, you need to harness this technology to create alternate versions of yourself. Basically, it's a multiverse style thing, but you're pulling in different versions of yourself that made different choices throughout your life to help you with basic tasks on this vehicle.
It really feels only in concept, because not in style, but it's like it's an everything everywhere all at once pitch.
Sure.
Which is like, I need to find the version of me that's good at gardening, and then you get that guy, and then he like makes the garden on your ship.
It's one of those like really nice fusions of storytelling and gameplay where they could have just made it like a what's the VR game, Jacob, that the clock stopper game where you're making copies of yourself?
Oh, the last Clockwinder.
Yes.
Yeah,
where you're like setting up automatons.
Yeah, so it's like it could have been as simple as that. Well, not to say that that's simple, but like the idea of you're just making a copy of yourself and having them like kind of assigning them tasks, right? But like the narrative conceit of like, we're going to make that interesting by saying like, this is not just you, this is a different you that you can have interesting conversations with, you know, like over the course of the game. Like that's a really smart idea.
And I like the idea too of it's like, okay, it's a past version of me that was able to hold the marriage together, and now I brought in that version of me to help out with this menial task, but he's going to be yelling at me like, you need to work on your relationships more, man. Like you should have kept that marriage together. Like that's a cool angle for just having some idiot to assign a task to, you know?
I feel like it's almost, I don't remember if it's a Treehouse of Horror or like where the kind of origin of this concept is for me, but like the thing where you think you're gonna make a clone to do all your chores, and then the clone is like, why would I want to do that?
Right. Yes.
You know, and so they're kind of, I like the idea that you are playing as a character, but all of the yous are like the protagonist of their own story, and so like why would they be interested in what you're trying to do? And it's like, these are big expectations that we're putting on this game that sounds really hard to do in a story, but like it's intriguing.
But that's the mission accomplished, I think, for a presentation like this is let's show you a trailer that sets your mind reeling, and it looks well done. And I trust 11-bit enough to be like, some of these ideas I feel like they're going to pull off here.
I think too, just the fact that, again, thinking of the idea of them mixing genres and styles, because I also like immediately clocked the last Clockwinder as well with the idea of the automation aspect. But to me, it also read as like management sim, you know, like overcooked but slow down, right? It's like you're kind of assigning people to do these menial tasks. So I feel like there's a lot of potential in the different layers of fun that can be had here. And I love anytime a game can feel really cohesive from top down. And I feel like here it has that, where there's meaning behind everything, there's layers behind everything. The things all connect and make sense. It doesn't feel like, oh, well, we did it this way because we wanted this mechanic in here. Even though, you know, obviously the pieces of what a game is, like, they have to come to be in some way, right? So it's not like, obviously there might be an aspect of connecting like disparate parts, but I shouldn't feel that when I'm playing it or hearing the pitch. And I feel like this totally nailed that, where I'm like, wow, I haven't seen something like this. It sounds really cool. It seems like it has a little bit of everything in it. Will it pull it off? I don't know. Like, can it be that interesting? But it'll be a more compelling failure than some games' successes, which I think is a win.
Yeah, I hear it. So let's talk about this frickin' vehicle.
And maybe it won't fail also.
That's the thing, yes. I'm just couching the like, I'm very excited looking at this, but at the same time, I'm curious as to like how it's going to feel to actually play through it.
Yeah. The part that I think the first thing that made me go like, oh, wait a minute, is when they show the vehicle, which is just like a giant wheel on this alien planet, but it's so...
A Fallout Shelter, but a circle.
It's a super smart idea, because like, yeah, you want the Fallout Shelter style, like you're building out this base, or like the XCOM Underground thing, right? Like easy layout for building out a base, but how do you do that in a 3D game? And the answer is you put it on a 2D plane within a giant wheel, which then rolls around this alien planet. It's freaking sweet.
I mean, I'm really excited for, like, I've played both This War of Mine and Frostpunk, and I think those are both really good games that I hate playing, like, kind of almost inherently in the concept. I mean, like, This War of Mine is just supposed to be freaking miserable the whole time. And, like, Frostpunk is a very good version of, like, a survival sim builder or whatever, but it's still just like, okay, so are you gonna, like, engage child labor? Are you gonna throw 5 people into the furnace? Like, you're constantly making those sorts of decisions. And so this will probably be intense, but I like that it's sci-fi and a little more detached from, like, how fascistic will you become in your pursuit of survival?
But 2024 for the alters here. What else is ringing true for people? What's the second most exciting thing in the showcase?
Sleight of Hand.
Sleight of Hand. Interesting. I'm sorry, Jacob. We can't accept that. There were cards in this.
Trailer, it reminded me of Balatro. That's why I thought
cards are hot.
Balatro-like, we're calling.
It's more of a Queen's Blood-like, I feel like. Sleight of Hand. It looked, when it started out, I was like, is this that Lamplighters League game that came out last year? It's got a great look to it. And then what'd you learn about the actual game here?
I mean, I think that there are a lot of open world games that are now incorporating a very boring version of stealth in them. You know, like most games have done kind of the Far Cry thing where you can sneak up behind someone. But, like, I feel like there aren't a lot of 3D, relatively high production value, like, pure stealth games that I can think of.
Sure.
Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I like that this looks... It looks kind of Dishonored-y and kind of, I don't know, some other thing where you get, like, cool magical abilities, you know, but it's just like, I like that it is seemingly purely a stealth game where it's going to give you a bunch of fun powers and you'll be able to use them to manipulate enemies. Like that, that sounds good.
It kind of had some vibes too of, like, our beloved game, Shadow Gambit, The Cursed Crew, which maybe that's why I was intrigued by these first couple games that they showed, because, like, Sleight of Hand gave me some Shadow Gambit vibes, and then that Unknown 9 Awakening game also gave me some Shadow Gambit vibes, because that also feels like there's stealth in that one as well. We were using, like, magical powers to warp in things from different realities, because that's the main story.
Both trailers had things where, like, characters would freeze their enemies and then, like, do things while they were frozen, and it was like one after the other.
Right. But still, hey, that's a fun premise, and I'm willing to open my eyes to that being a compelling game system for both these things. But
yeah, and I think stealth is a surprisingly good place to cardify the gameplay. Just because, like, even in stealth games that I really like Dishonored 2, it's easy to fall into like, this is the best tool at my disposal, so I'm always going to use that. So if there's an element of randomness, where, like, okay, you are limited to these options that none of them are ideal, but you have to choose the best one for the situation, I think could actually open up stealth gameplay pretty nicely. Like, if anything, the ideal version of this for me would be if it's like the stealth version of Neon White, where it's like you're kind of cycling through a limited number of options based on what you have, right? And so you have, like, one or 2 or 3 cards at a time, and it's like, okay, I have this really good option, but I only have one use of it, so I better save it and, use other options while I wait for, like, the perfect place to use, like, a teleporter.
Yeah. So Sleight of Hand is from Riff Raff Games here as a developer, but yeah, it does look cool. Curious to see more gameplay happening in there at some point. But
it also reminded me of, even though this one didn't work out for me because I thought the movement felt too slow, but EA Originals Lost in Random, which was kind of combining like combat with, like, dice rolls and things. Like, I think the idea of smattering those together just sort of adds, like, what is the specific flavor and intrigue if we've, like, seen this before and maybe seen it done, like, not necessarily at the pinnacle, but there's a lot of highs in the stealth genre. It's like, okay, well, this is going to be our new angle that makes it different and fresh and more interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Suriel, is there anything screaming your name?
I mean, you were denigrating it at the start, but I like Monster Jam Showdown. I thought that game was cool.
How dare you? I would never bash a good Monster Jam Showdown.
it was simple and done. Like the idea is like the second you see a screenshot of it, it's like monster truck racing game. All right, I'm good. I'm like, I don't need to see the rest of this trailer, but I'm glad I did because it was just like the most ridiculous racing stuff with giant monster trucks, and it's like that's a game that sells itself pretty well, like immediately.
You've really changed since you've gotten into game development, Suriel. Now you're the world's biggest monster truck fan.
I just like racing games, but and like seeing something that isn't like the super high end, like we're gonna make the another Gran Turismo or another Forza game. I like seeing someone else enter the like more cartoonish racing realm that isn't something a karts, right?
I often think about the Wii game Excite Truck for no reason other than it was one of the first Wii games that I had, and so I played a lot of it. And it's like, yeah, this has Excite Truck energy.
It does, yeah. Excite Truck made like 40 minutes from where I live right now in Minnesota here. A proud Minnesota staple. We talk about it's on the new state flag, I think. Suriel, it's funny because I thought for sure when they showed that new Capcom game, Kunitsu-Gami, Path of the Goddess, like this feels like a Suriel game. This feels like as Suriel as I can imagine.
It's also very strange because like the first thing that came to mind when I was watching it, and I don't think this is the first trailer for it. I want to say
there's one a while ago. Yep.
Yeah. But it like the initial like wave-based defense thing immediately reminded me of that mode that no one really liked in Monster Hunter Rise, where it's just like you're defending your fortress from waves of monsters. A thing that like people were like, you could just skip that section of the game and be totally fine. And they're like, we're gonna make a whole game out of that. But the more I saw of it, it felt like, okay, now they're actually taking this concept more seriously. It looks really cool. I like a lot of the aesthetic and the way that like you're actually managing a lot of action verbs in this environment and like taking down like all these ridiculous monsters. I thought it looked really cool, but it was like less novel to me, so it didn't stand out in this presentation.
Sure. Yeah, it's still, I mean, the visuals on it. I think a lot of these games, the presentation were great at standing out on a visual front. Just a lot of really colorful stuff in this overall batch. But I think Path of the Goddess, they ended with it. I think it's their closer. I mean, it is cool to see new IP here from Capcom. This is the game that a lot of people thought was going to be an Onimusha game when they revealed it last year. But it's tower defense-y, but not tower defense. They describe it as an action strategy game. It's basically Fortnite Save the World, where you're building up during the day, and then at night a bunch of freaky demons called the Seethe apparently comes through and attacks your town. But the cool thing is apparently like during the day you're like going and recruiting different villagers, and then you can equip them with different masks, which give them different abilities, and then you're assigning like where they're going to be in the town as these waves of monsters come through this portal from hell and try to attack the goddess who is trying to walk through the village, and you have to make sure she's not touched by the evil demons. That's the only part where I'm like, is this going to be annoying? Is this going to be like weird escort mission of the goddess having to walk through this battlefield and not get killed by these weird demons from hell?
I want to get my hands on it because I think the visual design of the game is so dense that I almost had trouble looking at the trailer. It was like the fact that it kept cutting to different scenes, and it was like I couldn't even understand what I was looking at before it would cut to something else. And I don't think that'll be a problem when actually playing it, but like it is a visually really dense game to a kind of dizzying degree.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was struck by this because it's like, it's cool to see Capcom doing something new. It feels like a passion project from that team. It doesn't look soulless by any means. But then while looking at it, I was like, is there an audience for this? Can they pitch whatever this game is in an abridged way where people will grab onto it? Like, is saying it's action strategy, it's tower defense meets stylish action. Like, is it possible for this game to do extremely well sales-wise? I think it's a really weird game to try and market, which maybe I'm too focused on compared to actually playing it.
Yeah, I feel like Capcom is really consistent about having like these one-off multiplayer modes, especially with like every time they release a new Resident Evil game, they're always packaging it with like another Resident Evil multiplayer suite. And so, yeah, I don't know how many of those have really hit, right? Because like I can't think of another.
Zero of them.
I feel like Monster Hunter is the only one, like their only kind of like live service-ish game that they've made.
Exoprimal.
Exoprimal didn't really,
it's on the tip of all of our tongues. We're talking about it every week.
So, I'm interested in trying it out. I don't know what its prospects long-term are.
I think what's interesting is that Path of the Goddess is single player. Like it feels like it could be like a multiplayer thing, but I think that actually has me more excited about it. You know, like if it's multiplayer, it's like, okay, they're trying to grab onto, I guess, part of their Monster Hunter fan base and bring them over to this. But the fact that it's like, oh, it's just a single player, weird tower defense-y style game. I'm optimistic about it. I was looking into it. The director is Shuichi Kawada, who was a designer on Resident Evil 4 and has worked on a lot of the Resident Evil games. But does anyone remember this? Apparently he directed a game called Shinsekai Into the Depths, releasing in 2020 on Switch and apparently mobile phones. But it was a Switch game, and Capcom developed it, and it was like a underwater fishing game. It was kind of like a Dave the Diver style game. And I have no memory of Capcom releasing this game in 2020, but apparently it's the same director as that game, which seemed to be received fairly well. But 2024 for this thing, Kunitsu-Gami, Path of the Goddess, if you're interested in such a thing. Janet, wow us. What do you got?
Creatures of Ava. That's my monster truck. I see that game and I'm like, all right, why not, right? It has that like kind of, I don't know how open it is, but it has like that open world-esque open shot where they pan up from the ground. And I'm like, you know what? There's animals, there's a flute, we're hanging out, we're hugging cute creatures. It's a lot of hugs, a lot of pets were given in this trailer.
Which is weird though, Janet. Let me just cut you off and tell you why it's weird.
Yeah.
Because people in the chat were also like, oh, this looks like Everwild. Like that game that Rare was working on and then put on pause. But it's like the same vibe.
Yeah, I do think Everwild had more of a, even though I kind of sort of forgot what the pitch was. I remember being a little more firm. Like while this, I had to kind of like look up ancillary information to like, no, like you're saving animals. That's it. Like there's no utilitarian purpose. It's non-violent. And you're just like saving the creatures because you care about the animals. And yeah, it looks cute. Like you're hanging out. The creatures are very colorfully designed. It kind of reminds me actually of the creatures from Peridot, which is the Niantic's other AR game.
Oh boy,
who could forget?
Yeah,
that's also right up there with Exoprimal at the tip of our tongues.
Yes,
but I did genuinely really like the designs of those creatures from that game, so I feel like this was compelling in that sense. Kind of got like aesthetically like Slime Rancher vibes, but again, this isn't gonna. I don't expect a utilitarian loop from this. But yeah, I don't know. You play a song and creatures flock around you. What's not to like? I'm there. We'll see how it turns out.
You control a bird and it rams itself into a bridge to lower the bridge for you or something. Also, the part that got me, Janet, is the like photography. It's like, okay, so you're gonna have a little Pokemon Snap going on in here, and they're big on billing that the game is written by Rihanna Pratchett, who wrote the rebooted Tomb Raider trilogy and all that stuff. Terry Pratchett's daughter, a sci-fi writer, but Creatures of Ava is the name of that game. And don't confuse it with the other game that's going to be on Xbox in 2024 called Ara Stories Untold. Ava and Ara, completely different experiences. Please. Also,
the logo of that game, Creatures of Ava, is impossible to read. The Creatures of, and I'm like, is that an A and a V and then another A? And then I was like, it was very not clear. So
it was a big presentation for unreadable logos.
Yeah.
They were really knocking those out of the park.
And this is going to be the most stylish, illegible thing you've ever seen.
I'm looking it up now just so we don't embarrass anybody. Merchants of Rosewall, Suriel, that logo, imminently readable. In fact, beyond that, I double check it because I say, Redwall? Oh no, Rosewall. So you get an extra oomph just seeing those words laid out there. It's perfect.
That was definitely not me.
Anything else that's singing for anybody from the showcase here?
It's cool that Stalker is going to be playable, I guess. I noticed, I was watching y'all's reaction stream, and it said, what was the wording on it coming to console? Where it didn't say enhanced, it said refined.
Yeah,
refined.
Which I think is like, Stalker is one of those games where like if you're looking at playing it on PC, people are like, okay, well here are the 7 mod packs that you need to like make it playable. And so I'm assuming that what this means is like it is not going to continuously crash, and they've given quality of life features that you would have expected 10 years ago.
No mod
patch
required is what they showed in the
trailer. But like that's been a game where it's like, man, I wish I wish that I did not have to like keep up with games as much as I do for this job, because like I would love to spend 100 hours like getting to understand Stalker.
Yeah.
But I just kind of can't see it happening. Dragon's Dogma 2 comes out this month.
Jesus Christ. Janet, are you down for Stalker? I know you're a Metro fan. Have you ever seen that old game Stalker? That's kind of the spiritual predecessor.
No, not really. I mean, I've been eyeing Stalker 2's release because of like me liking Metro Exodus. But when they said like, how they word it exactly, like the PC cult classic, I was like, old people everywhere are going wild for whatever this is. Like, I'm not gonna touch that at all.
But your Metro love, there's an entry point here for Stalker. You can become a Stalker freak.
Look. I've never played Stalker. I know that gameplay wise, this and Metro have very little in common.
It's a little more hardcore.
Yeah, for the refinement stuff on the like Xbox blog or whatever, they said innovative design and UI adjustments. So I don't know.
Lowering the innovation of Stalker. Yeah.
It genuinely feels like Stalker is kind of like, it's like Morrowind for Soviet dystopia freaks.
That's
you know, like, and I say that in like
Yes.
a very positive way, but it's like the people who swear that Morrowind is the best Elder Scrolls, I'm like, I believe you. I am not going to go back and play it.
Yep. That's the perfect way to put it for sure. And Chucky's in Roblox now. All right, moving on. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Can we talk about it a little bit? No spoilers again. We are doing the deepest dive for that whole game on MinnMax's YouTube channel. We've already talked about it for, I guess, about 7 hours so far, just the first 4 chapters. So you can check that out there in the bonus podcast feed if you want to help support that deepest dive directly. Jacob, as somebody who beat the game, is it weird to listen to the deepest dive? Are we way off on our enthusiasm?
I am so jealous of you guys, and not just because you got 4 friends and you're all drinking beers and hanging out in a basement, but like,
It's pretty sweet.
I had to come on this podcast after playing that game for dozens and dozens of hours and not talking to anyone about it, and attempt to be like, here's what I think of the game, which I think is even more impossible with Rebirth than that is with most games. And I feel like the Game Club format, or the deepest dive format, is like the best possible way to talk about that game, because it is just like fun moments continuously.
Right.
And then when you reach the end, I'm curious what you'll feel about the combination of all those fun moments. But like, I'm having a great time hearing y'all go through and like saying these things, because then I get to remember, oh yeah, that was really fun, you know, when that happened. And then just trying to like fit all of those. I've been talking to other people. You know, I'll occasionally get kind of other journalists or game people who are like, okay, I finished it. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
And they've given me the same feedback, which is like, now that I'm done, I really don't know how, like, I can't sum this game up in my head.
Right.
But hearing it gone through like piece by piece is helping me remember all of the parts of it that I like really did enjoy.
Yeah, Janet, I know you've been playing a lot more too here. Like, I've been thinking about Rebirth a lot, believe it or not, and talking about it nonstop. And I realized this morning, like, because it is wonky. I think you're totally right, Jacob. I mean, I am absolutely loving it, but it is a wonky game in terms of its structure, and I love it for that. But it's just a matter of like, every criticism I might have about the open world or anything like that, it's like, no game can come close to making me so happy, you know, like an hour to hour basis. Like, there's so many things that just delight me to no end. But I realized this morning, like, is this just kind of the Mass Effect 2 of the 7 remake trilogy at this point? Of like great character stuff, a lot of little character vignettes. But when everybody praises Mass Effect 2, I don't hear anybody going like, the collectors were awesome. That story leading up to the end, like, no one cares really about that, you know, but it's just like, but it still has so much strength just in the personality of the characters and just a series of little vignettes. Is that what we're dealing with Rebirth here?
That's a good comparison. I'm curious how you'll feel about if you feel like people got a satisfying arc at the end of the game, because, you know, the best trilogy middles, you know, just saw Dune 2.
Yes.
What a middle of a trilogy. You know, they're able to leave the characters in a really weird place because, you know, there's going to be another one, but at the same time, like, to be a satisfying story in their own, there has to be a beginning and end to like what the characters experience. And like, I don't know if that's all happening.
Okay.
Here.
By the way, I just saw Dune 2 last night. I didn't know that. I thought it was going to be just like, oh, they're taking Dune the book and splitting it into 2 movies and that's going to be it. So like when that movie ended, I was like, wait, this doesn't feel like this is a conclusion. I know there's more Dune books, but I didn't know that like that the studio's plans were like this was going to be a trilogy. Like, I somehow dodged that completely.
I haven't read the Dune books, but I think this is just the end of the first book.
It is, yeah. Which is weird for them wanting to make a movie trilogy out of Dune. Of like, okay, then Dune Messiah is going to be that book is the entire 3rd movie. But the point is Final Fantasy Rebirth, everybody. Janet, how are you feeling about Rebirth at this point?
Oh man, it's interesting because without getting into, it's weird because like, is it a spoiler if it's in the trailers? Like, I guess I got to a new area and I was like, oh wow, there's so many fun things to do in this new area. There's like, you can
say Gold Saucer, right? I presume.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, the beach.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Costa del Sol. Yeah.
Yeah. Costa del Sol. It's like, okay, cool. Like, hell yeah. We're on the Segway. We got our fun little outfits. Cool. And then something in me broke. And before that, I was like, man, like I almost wish, especially doing the stuff on the boat, like playing the Queen's Blood tournament. I'm like, so much fun to be had. There's some goofiness with Red that's really charming. And it's like, man, so many
might
cool
be the best cutscene in the game.
Yeah. It's like so many cool extra moments that like, and obviously we wouldn't get like hyper specific ever really talking about it outside of Deepest Dive or max spoilers on it. But it's like, oh man, I wish I had more of this to have shared, when we did like our initial kind of like review podcast discussion. But, I didn't because I just hadn't played that part yet. But then I also got, and this is why it's so funny, like playing stuff to completion where it's like, oh, it does change your perspective, but sometimes it's just more information on the same topics you already established in your mind, which is sometimes this game is really fun. And then sometimes I realize that I'm in a prison of my own making of this game. And I have officially hit the point where I'm no longer pursuing a more completionist run of this game.
This is my question.
Do it.
Yep.
I'm not having fun and I'm frustrated. And also the stuff I'm doing, some of it really sucks. Like the bootleg Rocket League minigame is terrible and I'm playing it and my partner's like, oh my God, you're so funny playing this game. Cause like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I'm like, oh, well, I want to get like the bracelet that I don't even need because I have better stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I have to stop. I can't do it anymore. I can't do this to myself. This is
my big question. Is like I rarely am 100% kind of a game player here. But I've been doing everything in Rebirth and enjoying it. But like those open world chapters, like it takes a long time and I'm enjoying it, but it definitely feels like, am I hurting my enjoyment of the main story by every once in a while they have this open world chapter and suddenly everything just kind of grinds to a halt and I really won't hear the characters interact sometimes for like hours, when that's the part that's really tickling my fancy. I don't know if I'm shooting myself in the foot here.
I think you're hurting. I mean, look, on the Deepest Dive, you said that you spent 1 hour playing that final mission of Fort Condor.
Right.
And somehow you do not hate this game yet, which is like that was, for me, that was the thing where I was like, you know what, all these like main side quests, I think I'm going to do all of them. And I got to that last level and I was like, I am going to break this disc in half if I have to like do this. But like, I think because the strengths of this game are so much in the characters doing stuff, I guess you're missing out on that if you're just doing towers, but like, as you've said, the reward for doing side stuff is getting fun little conversations, and they don't stop doing that. It's just that sometimes you have to spend an hour doing a level of Fort Condor, and I am not willing to subject myself to that, but like, if you are, they're going to keep putting cool stuff behind it, and I actually really regret giving up on some of the stuff or like having to give up on some of the stuff because I bet there's awesome stuff behind it. Like the things that you're getting teased with. I was like, oh, that would probably be really cool to 100%. But I just like, I couldn't beat the last game of Queen's Blood. I couldn't beat that last Fort Condor, like it just gets too kind of time consuming sometimes.
Yeah. Do you feel like, am I cutting this game slack just because I love the world of Seven so much? Like, honestly, I'm charmed by like, there's just a side quest that you can do in chapter 4 where it's like, oh, this side quest like has a theme. Like they're going for like a little story in the side quest. And I'm so impressed by that, but I don't know if I'm just patting my kid on the head because they're my favorite game and saying, way to go, you told a little story that's cohesive and worked through some human themes in this side quest. Way to go. Like, do you feel like we're just kissing this game's ass too much?
We as a whole, definitely not. I don't know.
Yeah, not on MinnMax.
Okay, but on the deepest dive, I suppose.
I think that it feels like y'all on the deepest dive are kind of exactly the audience that I want to be hearing from, because it does feel like you are who this game is made for,
right?
More than me. You know, even though I have like played and enjoyed the original Final Fantasy VII, but like I think that this game is way better at giving you things that you remember from the original game in a better way and making them more exciting and blowing them out than it is at like telling a comprehensive story in and of itself.
Right. Okay.
And I kind of think that's fine. You know, it's a little disappointing for me, but like the joy that each of these things are bringing you guys, I think that's awesome. And I'm like, it's really fun for me to kind of hear that happen. And I think I'm very curious how true this is. I was not expecting as high scores around the board as this game got. I was kind of shocked at how unanimous the praise was.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if a lot of the reviewers are kind of Final Fantasy old heads who are experiencing the same thing as you. I don't think they should have reviewed it differently, but like I'm curious as kind of more of the general audience gets their hands on it, if they're going to be like, I don't know what's going on here.
Yep. No, I think it's that classic conundrum that outlets have. Like, you know, we got review code really early for Rebirth. And so it's like, well, who are you going to sign the review for Rebirth? Like, well, the biggest Final Fantasy VII fan, the person that knows it the best, of course. And when they're just tickled pink, I've used tickled way too many times in this episode. Scratch that all from the record. The scores are going to be a little bit screwy in that way. But it's like, well, when the person assigned the review is this enthusiastic about it and they're tickled pink by it, like, of course the reviews are going to be high. It's like, it feels a little bit like a Monster Hunter, or I'm trying to think of like, maybe like a Dragon's a little bit like this as well, where it's like, well, there's the go-to reviewer in your outlet to tackle this type of game, and they're going to be a little more in the bag for this type of thing.
Yeah, or like a Street Fighter. You give it to the person who knows fighting games. You give it to the person who knows Final Fantasy. And it's like specifically for this, I think all the things that the game does well, not all of them, a lot of the things that the game does best are connecting to and playing with, you know, your memories of what this was like in the original. And if you don't do that, it's kind of baffling sometimes.
Yeah. Then again, I mean, newcomers are liking it. Like, not just keep pointing, but like, Dan Reichert likes it, but I'm still fascinated by that idea. Like, somebody who has no love for 7, like, this is just clicking with his, I guess, open world brain, but he's not even a big fan of that.
Yeah. Well, and how far is he in it?
I don't remember.
Because I think that people will hit. I think the game makes a great first impression, and around the middle, I think you kind of start wondering what the story is. And like that's, I'm curious as if people will start to hit that point in the same way that I did.
Interesting. Janet exploded on that note.
Yeah. Well, I just think that it's great at, and this is why I described this game in like our, last episode that we talked about it as like a pyramid scheme where like I didn't even realize that I was like won over by it until I was so far in that I'm like slinging the products to all my friends. Like, no, this is like the best lip gloss I've ever used and it could be yours and you can sell, because I do think it does a great job at, it doesn't have big strengths in terms of like, wow, like what a unique take on open world, or like, wow, such rich side quests. But there's just little enough that you're like, this is doable. I'm going to clean up this map. And then you're like, yeah, I'm getting that dopamine hit of doing everything.
Yeah.
Like, is it true that there's that section where you like wrangle the Moogles into a pen? I'm like, I've done this better in a million different games. Like, it's more fun in freaking Jak and Daxter. And that's not just because I'm a Jak and Daxter stan. Like, hitting the yaks is more fun than this. Like, this is kind of not that interesting.
Right.
But then they're like, thanks for all your help. Like, you can buy like a new hat. And I'm like, yeah, Hell yeah. Like, and
So
it
works.
really is good at doing that. And it feeds into that. It knows how to not overstay its welcome in like the construction. So it can kind of get away with not being as strong because like feels like, okay, I only have to like do this thing for this long and then I get a cool thing. So now I'm like, yeah, I got my cool thing. I got my check mark. I'm going to go around and get more stamps because I love having stamps. And that's kind of that feeling and that rush that it does give you despite being, you know, basic in construction. But again, not every game needs to be revolutionary in all of its facets. But for me, that's kind of why I did hit that breaking point of being like, you know what? I've been in here for so long. It's been so much. Some of these things are like not getting worse.
Gotta
but
trim.
Like,
Gotta trim it. Yep.
yeah, well, like, you know, it's like this already wasn't your strength, and you're like, now this is my weaker stuff. I was like, oh my God. Like, it's just, you know, where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go and just maybe, again, I kind of like to Jacob's point, I do want to still do some of that side stuff. I do like I like the game. I'm enjoying the game, but at the same time, like, I don't think this, like, I look at my hour count, I look at where I am in the game, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm giving this game too much time for what it is. I don't think it's worth these hours at this point. Like, there are other games that I wouldn't be annoyed at that I could be pouring my hours into, where I'm like, you know what?
But I think it's a testament to the game design.
I gotta dial back. I can't be playing this bootleg Rocket League anymore. Like,
but at the same time, like the fact that it's compelled you to keep playing, I think that's impressive. Like they are doing that dopamine structure of the open world well enough, you know, and I think that's worth commending, even if you're really then sitting back and thinking about what you're doing with your life, you realize like it's a lot of running around this open field.
Yeah, there is like a slippery slope there because like to what Janet said about like not knowing you were kind of under this game's like spell until it was too late. There's definitely a lot of like the way that
too late
can, interlink all of their systems, right? Because like you find yourself in this spot where you're like, well, I got to do the Rocket League game because, you know, I haven't played the game, so I don't know what the reward system is like. But it's like if I get a materia for my sword, then I want that so I can do the RPG combat better, right? And so, well, I got to do this so I can talk to this character because I really care about this. And so, like, you have all these like causal relationships that are like, wait, I like independent of itself, I would not play this Rocket League game, but there's like a nested reason for why I'm doing it, and that is, I think, like what a lot of people, you know, find themselves in. Of like, I don't know that I would find any one of these things like immediately fun, but the fact that all of these things are tied to the things I do like is the reason people end up spending, you know, like so many times in like, what's the Dragon Age Inquisition where they spend way too much in the first area. It's because like there are all these other progression hooks that are like, I'm not doing it because I like being in the hinterlands. It's because I want to get better loot so that I can go to the other area.
Do you guys know that, I think it's like a book and a nursery rhyme or a song, but the old lady who swallowed a fly. Do you guys know that song?
Oh, we're very,
It was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I guess she died, and it goes on. It's like, oh, she swallowed the spider to catch the fly, the horse, whatever. That's this game. But at the end, she dies, and I don't want to die. So I'm like, I think I have to stop eating all these mid animals.
I think it's... It is Suriel. It's an interesting point to bring up because this game came out so close to Infinite Wealth, which we had a very similar conversation about of like everything feeds into everything else, you know, that I like doing this and I'm also getting stronger at that. And it's like there are scenes in Infinite Wealth where it's like, okay, I'm being a waiter and I just have to like remember what each person ordered. Like, is this fun at all? But then like, I think there is, I don't know. I personally, and I don't want to start any fires here. I think the writing in Infinite Wealth is a little better than in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
That said, I am consistently surprised by how much I'm enjoying the writing in Rebirth.
I think Rebirth has surprisingly good writing. And if I hadn't just played Infinite Wealth, I would be even more taken with it. Yeah. But like, there is, I think Infinite Wealth maybe has the ratio a little better of like how much you need to do the boring stuff for than the good character stuff you get on the other side. But, you know, at the same time, like all of the things in Rebirth are more interesting than remembering someone's orders because you're being a waiter. And it's like, that is more of a game than those.
Yeah. What about
at one point you're doing
tricks on a
sit-ups for a while?
While you're driving around a crazy taxi.
Super crazy delivery!
But I do think on that note, I wish that there was more high points in the side content of of Rebirth, where like I think Queen's Blood, even if you don't like Queen's Blood, I feel like everyone can agree like it's really like well constructed and cool and interesting, and there's like a fandom around Queen's Blood, and I think
and when you get that first Queen's Blood cutscene,
it's awesome.
Like,
it is so compelling.
And yeah, like it has a lot of like great like interconnectivity where it's like, and I think that's like the perfect example of this game doing a great job like on all facets. And while you can't be like the best all the time, I wish there were more of those pops. And I think with more of those pops, I wouldn't notice that like, you know, we're starting at like a C level mini game and we go down to like a D. It's like, oh, I already was kind of just putting up with the fact that it was, you know what I mean? Like I only have so much to give in that sense. And like, I wish even Fort Condor, which I wouldn't say I like Fort Condor, but I understand it. And I think there's something compelling to the strategy of it. I'm just bad at it. And I'm kind of amazed at how hard it is despite giving you all the information to succeed. I don't know how they made this game so sensible yet so difficult, but I can respect Fort Condor versus like, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like mixed just stuff with like, I'm a frog and I'm jumping over something. It's like the mixed bag is a little bit, has more stuff in it than I wish it did. I wish we could drag and drop some of that over into like a more intriguing inherent thing where I think Queen's Blood perfectly has everything. It's fun to do. You get cool stuff. There's cool lore. Like, hell yeah, y'all snapped here, and you didn't quite snap as hard on some of these other pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's like, with RPG specifically, there is always this expectation of like from more classic ones of you need to do all of the side content so you have the best weapon so that you can beat the secret final boss, right? And I think like now we almost have had to discipline ourselves away from that mentality of like everything needs to be done so that I can do the best that I can. Whereas this, it's like, it's the opposite of like, they wouldn't design the game in such a way that you have to do all this stuff. So it, in a way, like just, I'm fine with just getting the introduction, like in Like a Dragon. I'm fine with just getting the introductions to all of these mini games. Like I'm down for one round of Snap Them Sickos or whatever. I know I don't need to do the rest of these in order to get anything that's going to help me finish. Like it might, but I don't need that stuff. If I don't want to do it, the game is going to let me progress either way.
Yeah.
I think too with the side content specifically, because it's different than like the mini. It's weird because there's like mini game content in the side content, so sometimes it is kind of nested. But you know, I had like that issue at Costa del Sol with the Rocket League minigame. And then right after that, it's like the Chocobo was wearing like a, you know, like a funny hat. And I'm like, now it's back to good again. Like, I don't know what to, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm like enraptured in this swirl of content that I'm drowning in.
You love the world.
Much at you all the time that even if you get something bad, then it's going to be like, can't deny that Chocobo with a hat, man.
Exactly. And it's like, this game is not waving but drowning the game, right? It's like I don't even know what I'm looking at here, but I'm kind of just there. So we'll see how the rest goes. But I do think I'm gonna free myself from the to your points here, like I don't have to play it that way. Let's find a happy medium so that like the final few acts of this game can be like more mechanically enjoyed by just being like, you know what if you didn't get the bracelet?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to just walk away. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
And you can pick and choose. It doesn't have to be like a thing you apply to everything, right? Because like as much as I'm someone who like with less time to play games, I'm always like trying to take more main paths. But, you know, Dragon's Dogma comes out at the end of this month and all bets are off as to like how much time I'm going to waste with that. And like there's a good chance that because I like the core gameplay of it so much that I end up doing stuff that I would not have done in something like even Like a Dragon or Final Fantasy, because, you know, like whatever systems are in Dragon's Dogma, I just prefer their action combat. So I'm willing to do whatever.
Yeah. For a lot more Final Fantasy VII talk, more than you could possibly imagine. Check out that Deepest Dive. It's been a super fun ride so far. Hey, Jacob, No Rest for the Wicked. This is the next game from Moon Studios, the developers of Ori. This game is going into early access on April 18th. This year. It feels like the last Ori just came out, but I guess they've had time to develop a whole action RPG at this point.
Gosh, I mean, I think it came out in 2020.
When Doom came out and Animal Crossing New Horizons came out.
That was the second Ori?
I think so.
Whoa.
Or around that time. Maybe I'm a few months off, but
okay. Wow, that's wild.
One of us can Google it in the meantime.
Yeah, we'll
2020.
2020? Weird.
2020.
So what do you think about No Rest for the Wicked, Jacob? You've been playing the demo?
So they gave me like a 30-minute demo to play, and it's one of those things where I don't think it's a very good demo, which does not necessarily mean that I have like I don't think the game's going to be good.
Okay.
But like it is, it's a wildly different swing for this developer, where it's like Ori is kind of my go-to when I'm like games that have perfect controls. I think about Ori, just like I think that's one of the best platformers ever made. I've played both of them. It's one of those games where it's like I want to get 100% just because the act of getting there is so fun and feels so good. And this is like a completely different genre where it's an isometric, I guess. It's top down, and it really is, at least in the demo that they gave me, like it is a Souls-like.
Really? Okay.
More than most other genres. It kind of, you look at it and you think maybe this will be like Hades, maybe this will be like Bastion, maybe this will be like another Supergiant game. But it is a game where combat is slow and weighty, and you have to really manage like your stamina meter, and the bosses are hard. But what was confusing to me about it is you get started with this demo. It's set in some sort of medieval world. I don't really have the hook for what's interesting about the medieval world yet. They just kind of showed a cutscene where there's like princes talking about like what's going on. And then you get in and it was like instantly letting me like chop down trees and like dig for things. And I was like, is this a survival game? I mean, I was punching a tree before I punched another person. And I believe that you're going to have a city settlement that you're building up and maybe contributing those resources to, but that thing wasn't in the demo. So I'm just chopping down trees and I'm like, what am I going to use with these? And they were like, nothing. You're not going to do anything with the trees. But it does have, I mean, I think the biggest positive for it is like, those damn artists at that studio are incredible. The game is kind of, the characters are like admirably ugly in a way that I find kind of funny, where it's like they all have really weird proportions and there's a creative character and it's like, oh my God, that's what they look like. But like in the game itself, even though it's isometric, there's so much movement and it's like, oh my gosh, the trees and the like grass is like blowing and like they're kind of particles in the air and the lighting looks really good, even though it's kind of like a painterly style. And so that is all really neat. But then you start playing it and it's like, it's this very slow, weighty combat. And I'm not sure what the hook of it is yet, because there are a lot of Souls-like games and like, I didn't quite find what was super interesting about this one yet. And
so just action RPG with this somewhat unique art style with Souls influence, like that's,
yeah.
It needs
and
some
I mean,
more.
It's certainly making choices. For instance, the regular enemies in the world, they don't respawn when you like rest at a bonfire. And actually, if you die while fighting them, they retain their damage. So it's like it's not nearly as punishing in that way. But that's not true of the boss, for instance, that, got all its health back every time I died. And it seems like, and I hope this isn't true, but it was true in the demo that I played. It was like every healing flask you have to craft individually. You don't actually replenish them when you rest at a bonfire.
Huh.
And so I was like fighting this boss over and over again. And then I realized that like I need to stop and like go get more grass to like make meals for myself to eat during this fight so I don't die. Which if you're making a game with like really hard bosses is kind of a crazy thing to do.
That is odd.
So I don't know. I guess it's like, I'm not writing this one off, but what they showed me was confusing because I have such a high opinion of this studio and I don't think they would do something just kind of straightforward. But like, I don't know what's interesting about it yet.
Just looking at it, I mean, yeah, there's the art style, which is cool. But then the part that is surprising to me is the fact that they do kind of the Animal Crossing Wild World or Death Spank, if you will, style thing where like things at the top of the screen are kind of like curved away so you can see more on the horizon. But that's really cool, I think, in this style of game. I haven't seen that done before.
Yeah,
like
it's neat. And there's a surprising amount of verticality in it, which is not something that you often get in this perspective of a game where you're actually doing kind of Soulsy style jumps where you're like jumping from one ruin to another and you're like, oh, I can get up there. And then there's like a piece of treasure there or something. And so there's certainly like the perspective and the art style and the world design is all pretty interesting. And I'm just waiting for like the mechanics to show me why they deserve to be in there.
Yeah. No Rest for the Wicked from Moon Studios, out April 18th there, in early access at least. So there's this game that's a tough one to talk about for why it's cool, but it's Astro Duel 2. The very easy pitch for Astro Duel 2 is that it is Asteroids meets Samurai Gun, and it frickin' rules. Is this a group that likes Towerfall and Samurai Gun and like those types of intense local multiplayer fun things? Do you guys like fun things?
I don't know if I like those. I don't think I've played those fun things.
God, what?
I like fun things.
Okay.
I'll say this publicly. I like fun things.
Janet, are you pro fun things like Towerfall?
Surprising, not my haters. I'm not pro fun things in this category.
Damn it.
No, I haven't played much in this genre.
Oh, man. If you have a group to play with, fewer things are more fun than just having a Towerfall night, you know? But Astro Duel 2, I absolutely love, because one of my favorite things in games, and it goes back to a bunch of retro games and stuff, but games where you're a little guy and then you can get into a ship. Like, I'm just a sucker for that very simple concept, right? Very Blaster Master, I suppose. But the cool thing about this game with Astro Duel 2 is it kind of varies level by level, but by and large, there's like a little structure and it's a 2D game and it's very Samurai Gun. You can pick up a gun, but then also you just have your swords and you all are fighting each other, be the last person standing, all this stuff. But then you can crash out the windows and then jump into outer space, and you're like Princess Leia flying through outer space in Last Jedi for like a split second before then bloop, and you pop the ship that you choose at the start. It kind of is your loadout. And then it's just asteroids controls, and then you're the ship and you can pick up different ship weapons, and just having that exchange of like an intense fight as people, but then jumping out, okay, now I'm a ship. Now I'm going to crash through this window up top, go back into the structure, turn back into the human being is so fun. And like, the ships have weapons, but they can't fire through the barriers to hit the people that are just small people inside the building, but they can with like special weapons. So that's where it just gets like absurdly fun, is like you'll get like a laser beam and then you can just like fire and try to hit these little rat-like people inside of this structure as your ship from outer space, as they're having the duel of their lifetime. Or like I was playing at Dan Reichert's a couple days ago, and just like this wacky situations happen in a very Towerfall or Samurai Gun style way where it's like, okay, we need to watch the replay in slow motion after that just to figure out what exactly happened there. But it's stuff like, you know, I will be in my ship coming around the edge here. There's two people fighting inside. One of them dies, then jumps out the other window. I fire like a rocket. The rocket from the ship goes into the building, through the building, out the other side, and then hits the person as they're converting into their ship and trying to boost away. It's like, it is such a blast. And I played this game at GDC, and I was really hot on it last year as well. We played it during the Give to the Max stream. I looked into Astro Duel 1, and it seems like not quite the same. But Astro Duel 2, which is on Steam and Switch, like if you like those types of local multiplayer mayhem games, like definitely check it out. I like it more than Samurai Gun. I don't think I quite like it as much as Towerfall, but it will be in that go-to arena for a long time for like, hey, if you have a group over and you like some Twitch fun 2D action games, Astro Duel 2 will be a great way to go. But there's 6 player support, and there's like a whole heist mode that I haven't tried yet, but the idea of like getting 6 Joy-Cons out and having this whole heist with these ships sounds so cool. So I definitely recommend it if you like local multiplayer games. Jacob, I've been so curious about this other game that you played. Laika Aged Through Blood. It came out last year, and it's been at the top of my heap of like, I've been meaning to get to Laika Aged Through Blood.
I saw this in, there's a YouTuber I like named Iron Pineapple who got famous for doing kind of like, I played, 12 more Souls-likes that you've never heard of. but over time he's been branching out to like, this game's hard and I liked it, so I'm gonna talk about it, in this situation. Laika's it's a really interesting game because did you ever play like the Flash games? This is my connection. I don't know if there were like older games, but basically like a 2D motorbike game where the whole game is like balancing the motorbike as you just kind of like adjusting your weight forward and backward to like go over a hill or a rocky thing.
Yeah.
So Laika is kind of like, it's like the roller-drome version of that, where you are biking around, adjusting your weight, trying to not land on your head and crash, but you're also shooting stuff. And in fact, your guns have very small clips and you reload them by backflipping. And then you can like counter enemy shots with a kind of shield, but the shield only has it can only take one hit. And so then you have to front flip to like regain your shield. And so you're getting into these incredibly acrobatic motorcycle combat scenarios.
Perfect.
Where you're like backflipping and front flipping through these things all while slowing time and like shooting guys in different ways. And it's like, it's really hard, but that just like microcosm of combat gameplay is really compelling, and I have been enjoying it a lot.
Yeah. And so it just feels like a Metroidvania, but with these intense combat scenarios?
No. Because you're not really... I think eventually you'll unlock new abilities, but it's not really. And actually, unfortunately, I think the structure of the game is kind of weak, because I would love it to just be like almost a Hotline Miami, just like a linear sequence of combat situations. And instead, you're kind of exploring a persistent world, and you're building it out, and you do... I guess it's like, you get a shotgun, and then you can go more places with the shotgun. It's not very good at telling you where to go, and I think it wants you to explore, but I don't find the exploration that fun. But it does have, it has a very cool art style, including during like big story moments or like beating bosses, it will like smash into incredible hand-drawn animation for like 5 seconds, and so it almost feels like you're seeing it feels like you're getting an FMV in like OG Final Fantasy VII, where you're like, oh my gosh, this is what it actually looks like, and it's like this beautiful animation, but the story is like really dark and pretty cool, and I like the characters in it. But yeah, it's kind of a big exploration game that has like really punishing, really cool combat.
That's sweet. Yeah, it feels like it didn't get that much love last year, and it seems like a shame. So I'm happy you went back and checked it out.
Yeah, I want to beat it. I think I'm going to start looking at a walkthrough pretty consistently, because I'm doing a lot of driving around, not finding where I need to go, and that is not quite as fun.
Yeah, Laika. Laika, Age Through Blood, if you're interested in that whole thing. Also, there's this game that is called Atuel that I am fascinated by. So this is a game, I was looking at presentations that are going to be at GDC this year, because we'll get more into that later, but it's going to be Janet and Haley and kind of sort of Leo and I going to GDC this year. But there's
how's that?
Well, Leo's going, but he's not going for GDC. He's going to create something else, but it's in the vicinity of GDC that we'll get into. It should be fun for folks. But I was looking at a breakdown of panels, and one of them was like, oh, there's a panel about the surrealist documentary game called Atuel. I was like, say no more. I need to find this game. And it's not on Steam. It's just on itch, but I am so there for any game that's attempting to move the vague genre forward of being a documentary game. And so it is a surrealist documentary game about a river in Argentina, which is kind of just Vince McMahon gif. I'm getting more and more interested as it gets more obscure. But Jacob, you also played Atuel?
Yeah, it's 30 minutes long. It's free, or it's pay what you want.
And he doesn't want to pay everybody, let the record show.
That's right. They should be paying me for talking about it. No, it's super cool. It actually reminded me a lot of like Everything. The game Everything, but with a really focused story and kind of like following a river, and then the river turns into different things, and so you kind of have different gameplay scenarios with the river, but it's all like the narration is great. It's using real. It's not like voiceover created for the game, as far as I can tell.
No.
It's just like interviews with people who know about the river and are talking about the river. And like, for a free indie itch.io game, the art style is phenomenal. Like that I think is like a really big pull.
Yeah, it is such a cool idea. Like as you're controlling this river, slowly getting bigger and bigger and converting into different animals that are dependent on the river and all that stuff. But I mean, the big thing is the interviews, and everybody that they interview kind of has a different angle. Some people are focusing on like the geological history of the river. Some people are a little more poetic. Other people are just talking about the importance of rivers to humanity throughout its existence. And like, you know, they quote a writer at some point, but one person just has this haymaker talking about rivers, and it's like, oh yeah, rivers are just like the human lifespan. So they start out small, and then they kind of get fast and turbulent for a while, and then they smooth out, and then when they get to the end, they just slowly dissipate into nothing. It's like, ooh, that's good. Just some good river thoughts in this thing. But I'm so excited that this game exists, and I want more games to incorporate actual human beings. So even though this isn't going to knock you on your ass or anything, I just am so happy that a game like Atuel is out there.
Yeah, it reminds me a little of, do you ever play Never Alone? That the game about like kind of Alaskan indigenous culture.
Was that? Yeah, I don't think I played it.
You're like a kid and a fox.
Okay, the fox thing. Yes,
both of them.
Yes.
This is kind of similar, but I like the end of the spectrum that Atuel is on a little better, because Never Alone was a little too gamey, and I just wanted to get more of the documentary stuff.
Right.
And then Atuel is like mostly documentary, but you're getting to do things with your hands and like looking at really pretty images, and so it keeps your attention the whole time.
Yeah, that's if you want to know how it's spelled, you can check out the description here, but it's Atuel for Atuel. Suriel Vazquez.
Yes.
I know it's been a while, but I have a pop quiz question for you. Do you know how this whole thing operates?
Hold on. I'm looking back through my notes of when I used Patreon.
That's right! He still got it, everybody! Patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Find the tier that's right for you. Find something sustainable for you, and that keeps this whole independent outlet sustainable as well. A special shout out to Outer Loop Games, by the way, the developers of Thirsty Suitors, that turn-based RPG. If you remember that came out late last year. That's kind of the easy shorthand is it's the Scott Pilgrim versus the World style turn-based RPG where you're battling your exes. But here's the thing. If you support MinnMax on Patreon at any tier, even that $2 tier, from now until Friday, March 8th, we will DM you a code for Thirsty Suitors on Steam. However, I will say, we only have 100 codes, which is very generous of Outer Loop Games, but it will be cut off if you see that the number of paid supporters on our Patreon page is over 4,252. You will not be getting a Thirsty Suitors code, but we do have Xbox codes. So even if you pass through that barrier, I'll still DM you to talk to you a little bit on Patreon and then offer you an Xbox game as well. So please jump in there. Thanks for supporting independent games media, and I hope you enjoy Thirsty Suitors or your Xbox game. Suriel, you're an eating kind of man, right? Like food?
I've been known to eat on occasion.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember that shirt you designed for MinnMax that was in the old store, so I'm familiar with your style. But Suriel,
guilty as charged.
Do you like taking, like a full day to get your food ready? Or do you like taking 2 minutes in the microwave to have the greatest meal you could possibly imagine?
I think if I had those two options, I would definitely take the 2-minute option.
Smart. If I had any option under the sun, I'd still take the 2-minute option, which brings me to Factor. Factor, everybody, genuinely, don't tell any other sponsor on this podcast, but Factor is my #1 favorite. I genuinely think they're great, and every time a new box arrives at my door and it's just filled with good food that I don't have to think about for a millisecond, I just puncture that film. That satisfying puncturing of film, pop it in the microwave, 2 minutes, bam, ready to eat. It's so good. There's smoothies, there's great meals there. They're all calorie smart, protein plus. You can get every option you want. And 2-minute meals, no prep, no mess. Factor meals are ready to heat and eat, so there's no prepping, cooking, or cleanup needed. Suriel, can you imagine anything worse than prepping, cooking, or cleanup?
Or a whole day, especially, yeah.
Exactly my point. That's why you need factormeals.com, everybody. So you can go to factormeals.com/MinnMax50 and use code MinnMax50 to get 50% off. That is code MinnMax50 at factormeals.com/MinnMax50. 50% off, just a big order of delicious meals ready in 2 minutes, delivered right to your house. Ain't nothing better. The only thing better, perhaps, is I'm 8-Bit. They want everybody to know about Day of the Devs. This isn't about funding Day of the Devs. This is just about attending Day of the Devs in San Francisco, because on March 17th from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific, if you're in the San Francisco area, you can go attend Day of the Devs and meet some indie game developers and check out a ton of awesome games. There are over 70 games here at this event. It's at the Midway in San Francisco. And Janet, do you know what the kicker is?
What?
The kicker is a great indie game. No, it's totally free. It is a free event. All you have to do is RSVP at dayofthedevs.com.
This economy? Whoa.
But check out the link in the description, dayofthedevs.com. Send them an RSVP if you want to come to Day of the Devs for 2024 in San Francisco. That kind of kicks off the entire GDC week, but we'll all be there. Leo Vader will be there as well, so there's a good chance you can see us wandering the floor and checking out some indie devs if you want to check it out as well. And you can help support I'm 8-Bit directly by going to their wonderful online store, and you can use the promo code ThinMints, no space, Thin Mints. Just remember, it's the best Girl Scout cookie and there's no comparison. Use the promo code Thin Mints for 10% off of everything under $100 in I'm 8-Bit's wonderful online store. Help support them because they support MinnMax in a big way by shipping out a prize each and every week to whoever has the best question submitted over there on Patreon. So, Suriel, you need to remember who has the best question submitted on Patreon. And then that person is going to get Bear and Breakfast on the Nintendo Switch, the exclusive physical edition thanks to I'm 8-Bit. Are you ready for this?
I'm going to take notes.
Okay, please do. It'd be nice.
Taking them right now.
Travis Fargo. Oh, are you taking notes or are you writing a game? Because it looks so similar. The way you do those two things. My God. Travis and Fargo writes in and says, hey, the other day, I picked up Humankind for PlayStation 5, which is that 4X game. I remembered hearing it was a cool Lemmings-like puzzle game with an interesting aesthetic. And I quickly realized that the game I was thinking of was Humanity, and I had no interest in Humankind at all. Have you all ever bought the wrong game? I assume this happened a lot with Outer Wilds/Outer Worlds. Certainly people saying that. I don't know if people are going to a digital storefront and getting digital or Outer Worlds instead of Outer Wilds there.
This happened to me this week for entirely my own fault, and I didn't buy it because sometimes I get codes sent to me. But I got a code for a game called Reevaluation. And I thought, oh, this is the game that Sam Barlow has been tweeting a lot about. I guess I'll try this and check it out. And I played through it, and it was like, a Gentleman's Six kind of walking simulator horror game. Uh-huh. And then I went on to Sam Barlow's Twitter, and the game he's been talking about is called Shiren the Wanderer. And I don't understand how I confused those two things. But I genuinely, I was like, oh, I've seen him tweeting about this. Okay, I like his taste in games. This will be interesting.
I don't have anything off the top of my head that's quite as dramatic as each of those examples, but I did end up with 2 copies of Loco Roco 2 because I didn't realize that what I had bought and played was Loco Roco 2. It's like modern era. Like I walked into this. Yeah, so I walked into the store in like our modern times with our technology, and I said, I'm gonna look at this case of PSP games and I'm gonna pick what looks cool, and I picked Loco Roco 2. Played some of it, still haven't beaten it, but played it. And I'm like, oh, I really like this. Great game, good times. Later on, I go to the store, and I'm like, oh, Loco Roco 2. Yeah, I liked the first one. I should get this one. It's also just called box. Came home. Actually, what I had played was Loco Roco 2, so then that's how I ended up with 2 copies of Loco Roco 2. Is Loco Roco 1 good? I may never know, because I'll probably just buy a 3rd copy of Loco Roco 2.
I only made these mistakes when I was a really dumb little kid. Like as an adult is obviously not happening at all. But I made the classic mistake, I'm sure a lot of people do this, of accidentally buying an expansion to a game, especially back in the day. So like I remember like seeing Age of Empires for the first time, like this game is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. I can't wait to buy it. And I made the hour-long drive to St. Cloud, Minnesota with my parents, and I got Age of Empires. And then I realized I accidentally bought Age of Empires Rise of Rome, which is the expansion, and you need the base game to play the original. I was like, oh, God.
Devastating.
It's just rude.
Yeah, I think I've told the story before, but my introduction to Street Fighter was actually because I used to live above like a little corner store, and we had a Mortal Kombat arcade machine there. And so, but we couldn't play it after hours, right? So we wanted to get a Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat, and we went and bought it. It said Mortal Kombat on it, and we turned the game on, and it's Street Fighter 2. And we're like, why is the SNES version so different? And until we realized, oh, it's a totally different game. But that game turns out pretty fun also.
Pretty damn good. Hey, perfect segue, Suriel, because John Skovic wrote in and says, finally, a fighting game person on the podcast. Yeah, sorry. You don't know how many people, Suriel, are in our comments on a weekly basis saying, you're hacks for not talking about Tekken 8. We hate you. Where's Suriel? Bring him back. You know, those types of common reference. Anyways, John says, let's get all of these questions out of the way while Suriel's here. Suriel, who's on your wish list for Tekken guest characters?
Tekken guest characters? Yeah, because they did a lot of franchise stuff, right? Yeah. I want Kiryu. Like, I think that's like Kiryu or Ichiban. I think Ichiban seems more likely right now, but Kiryu fits the world of Tekken better.
Right.
So I think he's a pretty common addition, or like a fan requested character. But yeah, I still think it's a good suggestion.
And what Harada got out there and said, Tifa won't be in this game, or he just said, shut up about Tifa. What was the Tifa exact wording? Because everybody's screaming like, she's the perfect Tekken character.
Yeah, I can't imagine them adding any more Square Enix characters, but maybe someone, you know what they'll probably do is they'll probably add the main character of Final Fantasy 16.
Oh, Clive, because it would have been in the pipeline for a while. Jacob, I saw that Final Fantasy 16 smirk. Don't think that wasn't noticed.
Character in quotes.
How
I think he would fit better in Soul Calibur. You know?
Okay, sure.
That's true. What if instead they added Bahamut? And he's just
that'd be good.
You know, fighting Heihachi or whatever.
They should have Bahamut in, just put him in like a Marvel versus Capcom, and I feel like he could play similar to Sentinel? What are the things from Days of Future Past?
Yeah.
You know, just kind of float and like shooting missiles and stuff.
That does sound fun. John says, Suriel, are you excited for Street Fighter 6 finally getting a balance patch soon, and are you still playing it?
I haven't played it in a while, but I saw the Ed stuff, and that's the closest I've come to like, I need to start playing this game again, because he looks what I wanted Jake to be. Because I thought Jake was like, okay, they're gonna, you know, maybe do a less like, you know, World Warrior caricature kind of character, and then like, I don't know, something about his moveset I just don't like. But Ed, his movement seems like this is exactly what I want. I want a dude who's just punching people all the time and also has mystical power.
Perfect.
But yeah, I'm hoping to get back into it once I have more.
Suriel, can you explain to the panel? Explain to the panel why they should be paying attention to 2KO from Riot Games.
I mean, it's the Riot fighting game. They've had Radiant, which is the guys who made Rising Thunder, and like they just have a lot of really strong FGC people. They have Tom and Tony Cannon who use Evo. So like I'm looking forward to it. Not super into the name, but I like the idea of them making like a 2-on-2 fighter, because I think it could actually end up being more accessible if you have that kind of like, I'm hopping in with my friends, but I'm playing with my friends against 2 other people. I think that could be super.
Makes sense. Then they say, thanks, Suriel. Welcome back, and congrats on the game announcement.
Thank you.
Hopefully this isn't too navel-gazy. Not Weirder writes in and says, hey, y'all. I really enjoyed the conversation on last week's podcast about defining success and finding happiness in your everyday life. On that note, I was wondering if there's anything you've come to appreciate about working at a smaller outlet like MinnMax.
Not many meetings, and not much driving towards like analytics. Like obviously there's an aspect of like, you know, we've talked about it even on this episode of Ben being like, you know, it's interesting. Like there's obviously like part of that, or even just, you know, more casually the fact that the codes of the patrons, like there's obviously like an aspect of numbers, and you're never going to get away from that because we live in like a money world. So like
slow down,
all kind of combines.
Yeah.
But there's not like, you know, something like, I don't know, oh, this posted really well. How can we replicate that? And how do I put that on the worker? Or like, hey, you know, there was never like, I did like our socials for that time doing Ben's paternity. There wasn't like why aren't we bigger than Game Informer on TikTok? Like there just wasn't like that kind of, I think a lot of times in a larger production, there's an outward look of like comparison combined with like a strive for like, how can we be number one?
Right.
Which I think in some ways can be good, but I think oftentimes just ends up being like, how can we control all these forces out of our control and work towards the top of Google's page when you look up this term, and
the decision making is organic, right? Versus like if you guys were truly maximizing for SEO, you'd be talking about Helldivers 2 every week and like all the latest patch notes and putting Helldivers 2 in the headline.
They nerf the railgun.
Yeah, or like they're adding mechs or whatever, and Joel or whoever the guy who everyone's kind of seen as the bad guy.
Thank you so much for talking about it. So now I can put it in the headline and we can really maximize SEO for this episode. I really appreciate it.
But yeah, so like you guys, I mean, there is this like, hey, we want to talk about the games that we're interested in that also happen to be popular. But you guys can sneak in things like, I want to talk about this game that I'm just really passionate about, and analytics be damned.
Yeah,
right? And like when you're at a larger organization, that stuff becomes more and more filtered of like, this is what I want to do. And by the time you get to actually do it, it's like, well, you can do this if you do this, this, and this, right? And then it ends up being way more conditional. Whereas having a larger, more involved role, you get to make those.
There's just not like, I have worked at places where getting an idea past the finish line meant getting it through just kind of an insurmountable bottleneck where it was like, this person needs to sign off on something and everyone else in the company is also trying to get this person to sign off on something. And so it's just like never going to happen. And like, I guess Ben has to sign off on things, but it is not like, the amount of layers that something needs to get past to happen is like 1.
Yeah, 0.6, I would say realistically.
Yeah.
Because like, there's stuff which I love, but it's like Haley and Leo doing those like Red Dead Redemption streams. There's been like some tech challenges. So the first one's going to be going up on Monday, MinnMax's channel. Like, I don't think there was a discussion about that I remember at least, but like, I love that. It's like, oh no, this is going to be good. They want to do it. F it. Let's just do it. And like, that is, I know this is obnoxious to say, but it is my favorite thing about MinnMax is just kind of like the quick turnaround. I love that we can have half of an idea on Monday morning and put it in the poll for New Show Plus, and then by Tuesday at noon on Twitch, it's like, here's a show.
Half an idea.
Yeah, it's half an idea.
Now we're live,
but
it's happening now. But yeah,
exactly
there's that immediacy of how things get made because it doesn't have, as much overhead.
Yeah, and it's interesting hearing you talk about like, not focusing too much on analytics or not being too competitive. I think there's an interesting, maybe the dark side, Janet, is like, that all still exists, except it's just in my mind and I keep it to myself.
But that's great because like, don't put that on me. Like, like that sounds like it's my boss's boss business. And in this case, my boss is just one person. So it's like, hey, if you want to do all that's between you and corporate. But I think oftentimes there's that trickle down of like, and you see it even like in retail jobs who, the customer, it's like, whoa, you don't own Kohl's. Like, let's dial it back.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. Like, I feel like as a group, I think it's just part of the funky structure of MinnMax, but it seems like by and large, people's like, we don't want to deal with numbers. We don't get too bogged down in all of this stuff. Like, I've even talked to some people with the idea of like, oh, do we have some system of like, if we hit these numbers, something, blah, 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 blah. It's like, just no, let's just pay people and keep things positive. We can keep rolling along. Don't overcomplicate it.
It's interesting because I feel like I like talking to you about the MinnMax numbers things. Like, I feel like sometimes I'm, in like a bonus pod or whatever. I'm the person who will come on. And it's like, because I'm trapped in my own hell with that, with my own channel. And so then it's kind of interesting to get insight into like, what's another channel doing with this? But yeah, it sucks to deal with. And it is honestly like very generous of you to take on that burden and not make it everyone else's problem too.
I do feel like it's funny. And again, this feels like a bonus pod conversation, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast where we did go through all the analytics and numbers and finances and stuff for 2023. Yeah, I do feel like it's such a funny thing in the Monday meetings where there's something that I've been like, not losing sleep, but really thinking a lot about like, oh, do we make this tiny change? It's kind of a numbers thing. And I feel like every time I volunteer something like that on a Monday meeting, I'm like, I've been thinking about doing this with the Patreon or like messaging this way. What do y'all think? Everyone's like, yeah, sure. And that's like, that is the worst I think I've got for this job is just people being like, I don't know what you're talking about, but if it seems like a good idea, go ahead and do it. Like, don't get us bogged down in that level of minutia, please, because we're going on with the rest of our lives, which is more important, Janet, you know?
It's the difference between like having that information and then still using common sense to make the decisions versus being shown a graph and saying like, because this number is here, we have to do this, and there's no argument.
Go up forever.
Yeah.
And we will.
And that's true of even like I'm an independent developer basically, right? And so we don't have like the kind of like corporate approval structure that other companies have. And so like in even though it's like, there's not the prestige of working on a major franchise, but the trade-off is I get to make decisions about what the story of this game is versus like having to talk to like, 15 directors or whatever and saying like, is it okay if I move this character here? And so you do feel like you have more agency over the project that you're making. And so, yeah, you get to make decisions based on like, what do I think is best versus being told for like, don't move on. We've had this discussion before you got here because of 18 different ways. You can't move that character,
right?
Even though it would be best. But we've had internal office politics that say, don't move that character.
Yeah. Yeah. This is again too navigating, and I apologize. But Jen, I love like the lack of meetings. Like I think if I got a day job, I would jump out of a window at this point, just for the amount of like friction to common sense things and just like meetings upon meetings where I'm really happy with MinnMax. Just like in terms of like, what, if there's something we're gonna do, like just get it done, move out of the way and keep moving ahead. Like stop thinking about it and just do it and try it. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. And I think meetings can just bog down so much of that stuff.
Yeah, because I think in a more traditional job, even if you just think of like an office job, like it doesn't have to be media. A lot of times, like you have so many meetings, it's like, okay, by the time I sit down, check my email, then there's a meeting, and then I have lunch. It's like sometimes you struggle to find, I think, pockets to even do work.
Yeah.
And I think that's really like the big con of meetings, because obviously meetings have their place. Like we have a weekly meeting, and I think that's a well-used meeting. Like they're not like, let's throw all these ideas out of the way. But I think when it's smaller, because you're leaner, it is easier to pivot things and to change things because, you have that leanness to it. And that has its own, drawbacks in terms of maybe like what you can do or, like you don't have the resources that like Suriel mentioned. But yeah, things are always a trade-off. And those are kind of some of the pros the question was curious about.
Yeah. Graham Walker writes in and says, what do you hate about MinnMax? No, it does feel like we need to even it out though. Graham Walker writes in and says, for some reason, for the longest time, I just didn't click that www stood for World Wide Web. What's a glaringly obvious thing that for some reason you didn't get? I do remember Douglas Adams, the author, he pointed out in a book that saying the abbreviated version www is longer than just saying World Wide Web. Like it's more work and syllables, which is a weird concept.
I always say worldwideweb.google.com.
Factor.meals. What's an obvious thing you didn't realize for a long time?
I just recently realized that when you get interest at like your high yield savings account, that interest is taxed. I don't know why I didn't think it would be. It's like once I heard that, I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense because it's income you earn and you can't earn anything without like giving some of the money to the government if it's above a certain threshold. But I was just kind of like, I thought I was out here getting some free shmoney, So I was really floored by that revelation.
I also don't know how obvious anything having to do with investments in financial systems.
Yeah, there's nothing that you should have realized. It is a system meant to drive you crazy.
It's not like there's like third grade,
that.
We're going to teach you about accrued interest in APR.
But they should, Suriel, they should.
Talk about a real life skill.
For my podcast, Something Rotten, everyone go listen to Something Rotten. This next season, we're playing Disco Elysium. There's a very racist character in Disco Elysium whose name is Measurehead, and it only clicked this playthrough that he is literally obsessed with measuring people's heads. He's like a skull size guy. And it's like, his name is Measurehead. It's just that. But I had never put it together that it was referring to phrenology until now.
Perfect. Identifying racists and financial interest compiling. Two correct answers for Graham Walker's question. Ampex writes in and says, hey, everybody, no question today, but an update on the push for saying rogue games instead of roguelikes/roguelites that you all are doing. I want to say that since the Indie Council started and since Janet started appearing on Remap, I'm getting a lot of Janet content every week. My podcast feed is basically the Janet verse at this point. But after listening to all those podcasts, I've noticed on every one of them, Janet is always saying rogue games. She's out there still committing to what you guys pushed for but gave up on. So hats off to Janet.
I'm fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
Admittedly, a large part of that, which I don't know if this shatters the glass of the nobility that I don't have. But
okay.
A large part of that is just, I'm tired of having to double check. Is it like?
Yes.
Is it light? How do we define like and light?
Yep.
It is just simpler.
I'm totally
here I
with
am.
you. Thank
An
you.
island
And
of
you're a
one.
huge fan of Rogue, right? You just play Rogue all the time.
Yeah,
where do you
it keeps
start?
coming up because my whole feed is just filled with that on my playing list.
Zeth Hillman Johnson writes in and says, what game do you think didn't get talked about enough in its time? What did gamers move on too quickly from? I love this question. I feel like it's every game, but my brain is broken. What game didn't we talk about enough?
Yakuza 1 through 5.
Great choice.
Why
Great
did
choice.
Why did I only start hearing about that series with 0? I would have loved to be playing this series my whole life.
Yeah. And I'm sure it came up, or you saw like some okay score like on GameSpot or IGN. I think it was probably my experience for like the first Yakuza. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to get that. And it's like, it's kind of like Shenmue, but a crime story. Not interested. We were all so stupid back then. I guess my first one that came to mind is a more recent one, which is Star Wars Squadrons from Motive. Like, I thought that was such a weird pitch. Like, after the disaster of their Battlefront 2, just be like, hey, we're making this focused one-off. There's not going to be a battle pass. There's not going to be microtransactions. It is a spiritual successor to X-Wing and TIE Fighter. Here you go. It's a sweet Star Wars dogfighting game. And EA did it. It seems like they pulled it off. Played great. It was cool. And I feel like there was one half of one conversation about it collectively on every gaming podcast. It's like, this is a Star Wars game. That's kind of like, it feels like an underdog in the Star Wars canon at this point. And we all just moved on so damn fast. Thank you. I mean, Leafy on the Backstage Pass, he's with me. He said it was fantastic in VR too. Oh God, I forgot that it was in VR. That does sound cool.
Yeah, I feel like that the Yakuza example specifically definitely feels like an evolving taste thing where I think people, American press were maybe just not as like attuned to those games. And I think as time went on, people who were into those games got more of a platform. And I feel like that happened a lot with like visual novels as well, where I think like the Phoenix Wright games were like, okay, these are consistently good, but everything else didn't really measure up for people to talk about them. So like Ghost Trick, I think it was a game that feels like it's one of the best, like, you know, it's a puzzle game, but it's mostly a visual novel too. But yeah, like that game now, it feels like it's like really well regarded and people really liked it. But, you know, that was like my game of the year for 2011. And I felt like I was the only person talking about that game. Like, where were you all like 10 years ago talking about this game that now we all suddenly agree it's good? Like everyone else was like completely ignoring it back when I was like really into it.
I feel like, you know what? Even the re-release of Ghost Trick, I still feel like, and maybe it's because I didn't get a chance to play it, even though I've been meaning to play it for over a decade now, but I feel like the re-release was also just barely a whisper, and it's kind of a bummer. I have it on the list of things that I'd love to do a deepest dive on someday, but I'm trying to be realistic about that list because it never stops growing.
Yeah, I think it's a really just underrepresented game, and I know that there's a lot of like positive sentiment for it, but it never feels like it's enough.
Yeah. Crowboy is a great one in Backstage Pass chat saying Divinity Original Sin 1. Dragon Age Inquisition was the only RPG people played in 2014 for some reason. Yeah, I'm sure that was a great game. You're totally right. Green Mountain State says, hey, MinnMax, question for Suriel. Do you still keep an eye on Destiny 2? And if so, does your recent game development experience give you insight or appreciation for Bungie's narrative team's recent successes and hurdles in Destiny?
Yeah, I do still keep up with it. And not as much as I used to. There was definitely like, I think around the time that Lightfall came out that I played it pretty regularly still. And then slowly, I just got to the point where a lot of the loot grind really got to me and I had way less time. And I got to a point where I was just running the same activities again. And I don't know that I have like the patience for this to kind of like farm this one encounter for a prize anymore. But I do still play it with a couple friends every once in a while, and just getting the Cliff Notes version of the Destiny stuff is like the best way to experience it sometimes, where it's like, yeah, this is all happening, and you hear the overall plot beats and it's like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And then having to experience over like doing this activity this week will get you this bit of story, and then you have to run back through it again. So I don't touch on it as much as I used to, but like it definitely feels like their seasonal storytelling is really, really strong. Even when like, you know, people were not super into Lightfall at launch, but their kind of ongoing story format feels like it's something that is also kind of not as talked about when it comes to like emerging narratives in video games, because everyone's kind of so they take the live service stuff for granted, where it's like, it's obviously it's like a weekly update. I don't know, new quest text, whatever. It doesn't matter. But like there is kind of like an interesting experiment going on with how they're telling the story between seasons, because like that stuff is not like if you play the Final Shape without having experienced those seasons, you are missing. Even if you've played Lightfall. Yeah. So it is kind of like a weird under the radar thing that's been going on that I think is working pretty well.
There we go. Cree McGee wrote in. I love this. Cree McGee says, howdy. A couple of weeks ago on the podcast, it was asked if the crew believed that Dead Space Extraction was anyone's favorite game of all time.
Oh, man.
I did a little follow-up research, and I found some praise that is pretty close. So Mark Smith over at Game Light Chronicles said that Dead Space Extraction was his personal favorite game on the entire system to date. So that's close for the Wii. Okay. Westmeister131 wrote an Amazon review saying, absolutely positively amazing game, so much fun and incredibly addictive. The Nintendo Wii is now my favorite console. So that feels right.
Okay.
Daniel McClinefield of Slant Magazine said of Extraction, Visceral Games' Dead Space Extraction is a game so good, it single-handedly redeems its entire genre.
Wow.
Increases. I couldn't find anyone online specifically calling this game their favorite of all time, but this research left me a lot more confident that this hypothetical weirdo is out there. We will find you if you're out there.
That's such a fun rabbit hole of like the most positive praise for like hyper specific games that most people think are okay.
Right. Yep. I want to do a show at some point. I don't think it quite works for New Show Plus, but I want to do a show at some point that's like the biggest fan of blank. You know, it's like, I just don't know how you'd
find it.
The
game champion, if you will.
I guess so. Yeah, but it's like, I was trying to dig into it recently for Dragon Ball The Breakers, that weird 7v1 game that I'm still fascinated by endlessly. But I was like, I went to like the Discord, like trying to dig through, like, is there any way to determine just like, I want to find the #1 Dragon Ball The Breakers fan and just talk to them about the state of that game. But it's tough to find, like, how do you narrow it down to clearly these people are the top 5 most enthusiastic
people. It feels
people.
like you'd have to like somehow search like the subreddit and be like, who's most actively posting, or I mean, who's a mod on the subreddit maybe.
What you look for in a subreddit is you look up the most popular post that is not a complaint.
Oh,
and then that's like the one thing on a Reddit that is like, okay, this guy's really into this game. If he's willing to post something positive on Reddit about this game, he's really into it.
That said, the Dead Space Extraction subreddit is popping. I don't know if you guys have been there or the Discord lately. Like, it is the place to be.
Yeah. It's my favorite part of a subreddit is like how they change the like how many people are online versus how many people are looking at it.
Yeah,
I want to know what the portmanteau or pun they make of like, there's 200 whatever people on the Ishimura.
Extracting.
Yeah, and like 232 extracting. The other way you could look for this for any single player game specifically, so for like Dead Space Extraction, is you should look on the speedrunning leaderboards for that, because those people are probably the most dedicated people.
Yep.
So then you infiltrate their Discord and say like, what do you think about this game? And they'll probably be like, well, I like it enough to have played it for 100,000 hours.
Yeah, that's it. Nicholas Alger writes in and says, in between catching up on games from last year and Toomey runs a Balatro, I'm preparing for my medical school interview. Not sure if any of you are familiar, but med school interviews, especially in Canada, are really daunting. They're over an hour long. You're cycled through a bunch of interviewers and primarily given ethical dilemmas to discuss comprehensively in only a few minutes. Jesus Christ. My interview is virtual, so hopefully I can channel Ben's energy during all of his conversations with developers. I just ask follow-up questions. That's all you got to do. I'd love to hear each of your strategies for controlling your nerves before an important event through your webcam. This is such a specific thing, but I know that feeling for sure of like every once in a while I do an interview I get really nervous for, or I remember, I think like webcam wise recently, I think the first time I was on Kind of Funny Games Daily, this was back in the old MinnMax studio, I was just like shaking. I was so nervous for that show in particular for some reason. I think it's just because Greg Miller's so like big and masculine and talented and handsome. I was
going to say, I'm like, was it the episode we were on together? Because I didn't.
No, I didn't care about that one.
Like, one day this guy is going to call me on my honeymoon, so I need to impress him.
Just imagine. And I hope the honeymoon's with him. But I was so nervous on that. But it's an interesting thing of like, yeah, how do you calm your nerves before a webcam or a Zoom thing in particular?
I would love to know.
Oh my God.
I feel like listening to music is my only strategy.
Ooh, that's
It's
good.
like you've got your headphones on, but just like having something going to kind of quiet the voices in your own head.
I was just thinking about it recently that I don't know how to feel about it, but I guess Obama before debates, he would hype himself up by listening to the 8 Mile soundtrack. And there's something so funny about like, yeah, or like the president of the United States, like you only get one shot.
Wow, real Kendall Roy.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I think you have to have like whatever your things are. Which I guess, I don't know how much time this person has to experiment to find that thing, but yeah, it could be music. Maybe it's calming. Maybe it's like, you know, a meditation on an app. Maybe it is a hyped playlist. Maybe it's a calming playlist. It just depends on what your mood is. I think for me too, the thing I really hate about like an intense like interview call over like Skype or something is the lead up before. Like that's my type of neuroticism. Like I'm like, oh, something's at 10. Nothing. I can't do anything between 7 and 10 because I gotta prepare. So I think set it at a time that feels good for you, like maybe early but not too early, or like post lunch enough where you know you're not tired. Things like that. I think too, like having notes on the side if that's applicable, because you do have the advantage of there being like screens around you, so you can set up something like near your camera that you can like look at the notes. Like I have chat like kind of near where my webcam is for like this show.
Yeah. And for medical interviews, just Hippocratic Oath, you can print that out or like put it on a Post-it note, I think, and put it on your monitor. I think that would help.
Yeah, I don't know, science, like whatever, you know, the answers to science, like put that on your monitor. And I think maybe having something to fidget with or like have near you, or like a, you know, pen and a pad. Like you have the pro of like they can't see you from like the torso down. So you can kind of do whatever you want.
Totally.
In that zone.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing too is like meditation helped me a lot. And then the biggest thing is do a ton of exercise earlier that day. Push yourself to your physical limit and it'll clear your head so much. So just if you're not a runner, try going for the longest run you've ever gone on earlier that day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You don't want to tire yourself too much because then you're just trying to fall asleep on the. But yeah, on the rare occasion that I'm called to return to a podcast where I'm expected to be funny and smart, and I'm also an alumnus, so there's a pre-built amount of chemistry there, and you're also representing a company you work for on one of their biggest weeks of their tenure. I like to have a little snack beforehand, and also have bullet points. Like I like to have notes, but I don't like to say like, you know, I don't like having complete sentences because then I feel like I'm then responsible for reading those sentences verbatim. Yeah. And then that kind of will sometimes trip me up. So I like having just like one word things about topics I want to talk about. So I don't feel like, oh, am I forgetting something? Because that's the biggest stressor that I have. And I think that works for job interviews too, of like make a list of things that you want to talk about, you know, like benefits, compensation, you know, work hours, et cetera. And then just you know, it's not an interview where you're trying to be entertaining. It's like you need these bits of information to know whether you or not you want the job. And that's the other thing, is to think about it not as like, are you good enough for this job? Versus like, is this job good enough for you? I think that helps to calm you down versus like, they have to rise up to you as much as you have to rise up to them.
Right. Is this medical interview good enough for you?
Well, like, it's like, will the hours be like, is this what you expected? Right. On some level, it's like, are there things that you may not know about the job yet that might actually kind of hurt it? Like if they ask you to relocate, or for example, right, like you want to make sure that is out in the open before you think about like, this is my dream job, I need to have it. So you don't feel like I need to step up for this interview. Anything you can do to make yourself feel a little bit more calm definitely helps.
You know what I was thinking about recently? Tell me if this is a twisted thought, but you know how I feel like I hear people thanking employers for hiring them a lot. You know, like, oh, thanks to this person for taking a chance on little old me, that type of thing. I was like, is it controversial? I don't think you should ever thank an employer. Like you can you can thank them. No, certainly you can thank them. Like if they did nice things after they brought you on or went out of their way to like be a good boss or something like that. But that basic idea of like, no, they're hiring who's best overall.
Oh yeah. I wasn't joking.
Yeah.
Like I mean, obviously like I kind of get where you're coming from, Ben, where it's like, oh, I don't want to like, you know, put down someone's moment of appreciation or gratitude. But yeah, like I think it's it is. I feel the same way. It's like, yeah, let's not go. Oh, they hired you for a service and you're providing that service.
Yeah.
Like, you may love it and enjoy it, and like obviously, like I think that's totally fine and fair, but you have to also like come down to earth because you're already there for them. Like, they're not gonna like, oh well, you know what I mean? It's like it's just a job. It's
but it's specifically the hiring process. Like, I think there's plenty of room for thanks every which way beyond that. But I think specifically that hiring thing, it's like they're not doing you a favor. They're choosing the best who's best for them.
Right.
You know, it's such a weird thing.
Exactly.
It's like they're not going to hire you in a position where like you make more money than is worth them. Like you're not making more money than they are losing out of you, right? Like the equation always benefits them. Otherwise, they wouldn't hire you.
Right.
So like they are gaining from your experience.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful to be where I am, but it's like, yeah, you can't necessarily kind of set up the relationship to be like, I need to do everything in my power to maintain this job. Because that sets you up for failure. And that also helps with like imposter syndrome, right? The idea of they wouldn't have hired you if you didn't know what you were doing.
It also implies the idea that in the older reality, like you just fail in every other universe. And I don't think that's true. Like, I think if you didn't get that job, you probably would have got a different job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve Bellegarde writes in and says, hey, MinnMax, I had this debate with my friends and I wanted your opinions. Steve, I like you and your friends here based on this. So Steve asks, if someone has prepared orange chicken for you, but they secretly replaced the orange sauce with Dayquil, the chicken is cooked normally otherwise, how confident are you that you would be able to figure it out before you took the first bite of that Dayquil orange chicken?
First bite.
Before you took a bite of it?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think I would.
No, you would just, you would assume, like, I would be like, guess I thought it would smell a little more like what I'm used to orange chicken smelling like, but I would never, similarly to a MinnMax star question, what if the moon disappeared? I would never go to like, it's probably Dayquil. Like, the moon probably disappeared.
Yeah, and if
The old
somebody,
Dayquil chicken gag.
I do love, like, my favorite is if I'm at an airport, I need to find just the crummiest Chinese place at an airport. That's just, I can't be at an airport and not eat Chinese food. My brain can't handle it. And I feel like there's such a wide variety of quality when it comes to like orange chicken at an airport that if one of them was just Dayquil chicken, I would just eat that and probably not even notice after finishing half the bowl. So there we go. Look out, everybody. They're running amok. It's like the new razor blades and apples. There's a lot of Dayquil chicken happening out there.
Kids, check your trick-or-treat baskets for Dayquil in your chicken.
Kelsey Sims writes in, a new Patreon supporter. I remember that name. They say, hey, gang, the past month or so before Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out, I played the original game for the first time, replayed Remake and the DLC, watched Advent Children and The Deepest Dive for Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I've been reading the tie-in books for Final Fantasy VII. I've been listening to the different soundtracks constantly. It's wild to see it all written down, but when I get into something, I really get into it. My question is there a piece of media that you were anticipating so much that you fully immersed yourself into anything about it you could get your hands on?
I was definitely like that with Super Smash Brothers Brawl, where I was religiously
Suriel,
reloading that.
Kind of what I was thinking.
This is the safest place because Jacob, you and I think all have that in common.
Smash Bros. Dojo, baby.
You're going to Smash Dojo, to every item. Oh, look at it.
The Cyber Sword. It's in here again.
Just imagine, I mean, it was a different time on the internet, right? But imagine if every item and every character of everything in Smash Ultimate was just like on a web page, and every morning you can go and refresh and there might be a new character for Smash there one day. Like, how is it not the most addictive thing? Yeah, it was the wildest website ever. Like, it was so much fun to stay on top of that.
Because like the website was set up in a way where it's like they have their header page where it's like, do you want the American or do you want the Japanese version?
Yeah.
And then it's just like the first blog post, right? Like the latest blog post. So it's like you would just click into this thing. And I still remember the day where I clicked on it and there was like Sonic the Hedgehog. And
huge.
like just freaking out, like they've done it, even though Snake was already in it. You know, he was like the first crossover character announced. But like, this is the moment that everyone was waiting for. Just immediately going online and seeing like, what are people saying about Sonic the Hedgehog being in Smash Brothers?
And finally, you could seamlessly merge your Sonic fanfic, and it was now cool Smash Brothers fanfic is no longer just random Sonic fanfic.
Cool.
Yeah,
I also had to merge it with the cool part, so I'm still waiting for that.
But yeah, in terms of like, you know, taking your own deep dive into something, does something pop for people?
I recently did this with Pinocchio.
Right, of course. Yeah, that's exactly it.
It was, it was fine. I wish I was more excited about it, but it was that kind of thing of like, when you're kind of going along the Dunning-Kruger curve of you're like, I think I'm going to learn like, the most about Pinocchio that I can. And then you like get like 30% into that research process and you're like, oh my God, there's so much more than I thought. I'm never going to get, like anywhere near knowing anything about Pinocchio.
And then at the end, stuff was still coming in. Like, I think, didn't you have some tweet or something where you're like, oh, damn it, of course, Arsenal gear and Metal Gear Solid 2.
Tweeted that Raiden is Pinocchio or something.
It's like, I was right there, man. How did you not connect those dots yourself? Let's see. Victor Pham writes in and they say, what are your travel goals in the next decade? What a great, simple question, Victor Pham. Travel goals in the next decade. I feel like I have something in South Asia calling my name. Like, I feel like I should go to Vietnam.
Orange chicken.
No, I feel like I should go to Vietnam or Malaysia, or if you want to rope it in, I also feel like I should go to Australia at some point. Like, that vicinity, I feel like is just a corner of the world I need to go explore definitely within the next decade.
I feel similarly. Mine is kind of, I want to go on like a Thailand nature trip.
Yeah.
It's like every so often I see pictures of like, those kind of beaches in Thailand where there's like the giant rock sticking out of the water and it looks like Pandora from Avatar.
Yes.
And I'm like, God damn it, I should go there.
Yeah, I still have the more mundane goal of like visiting every state.
Ooh, yeah.
So I have one road trip left that would put me that would cover the rest of the continental US that I haven't visited. And then I would have to go to Hawaii and Alaska, and that would be it. So I'd like to do that. And then
Yeah, I'm so proud of myself where it's like within a year and a half span, I think, I went to Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. And I'm so glad, like, all right, check all that off the list. That was great. And Suriel, the secret? Alaska's the coolest.
Yeah?
Yeah, Alaska rules.
How much of the days were sunshine where it's like you don't really get the sun to set, right?
It was a majority sunshine. It was really weird. Like, I had a moment where we had like a little Airbnb in his little cabin, and there's like another cabin that wasn't too far away. And I remember it was midnight, and I looked out the window, and there were guys on the picnic table outside playing cards without any lights. I was like, that is just a cool thing to see.
I want to know what's the most underrated state.
What's the most underrated state?
Where you're like, you know what? This state actually really hits. Like, people aren't talking about it.
People aren't.
Nebraska, baby.
Honestly, it might be like Wyoming or Montana, just for the views, like those really mountainous, like very forested areas. Because I know,
so the ads
I love the Pacific.
About Wyoming and Montana.
Because the Pacific Northwest, everyone is like Washington, and and so like all of the Seattle area is really nice, but like that area extends to Montana and Wyoming. Idaho, maybe not so much, but the rest of it I think is really nice. I only drove through the narrowest part of Idaho, so it's not very representative, but I was running out of time, so I had to book it through Idaho.
Running out of time. I'm gonna look at I have a weird history with Montana where like we would go there almost every summer throughout my childhood because we went on like a big 2-week car trip every summer, and we went to Montana again and again and again because my dad was obsessed with it. And then I feel like it was just like in the last couple of years where it's like, oh, Montana is just exploding, and it's become just like the hot commodity. It seems like everyone from California and Washington, they're just going to live in Montana. And so now it feels like, oh, is Montana overplayed now? Like it was always like,
it's working.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on over there.
For me, it would be Japan for like, I want to honeymoon in Japan. And then I want to do the Abbott marathons. So if you're not familiar, I think I've talked about it on the show, but you have to run a marathon in these different cities. So the cities are Tokyo, Boston, London, Berlin, Chicago, and New York.
Whoa.
You do that, you submit it to like their site, and like you get on their like leaderboard, and they give you this sick medal that's like 6 little medals combined in a big circle. It's kind of like it scratches that like that itch of when you collect all the Dragon Balls, you put them all together, and then I don't think anything happens when you get the medal, but you win bingo kind of energy, right? I
think you would be powerful enough at that point.
I hope so.
You could make a new leaderboard if you had all the Dragon Balls.
But besides the tough part of just like the physicality, the money, all that, you have to qualify for the Boston Marathon, which I think people that don't run might not know. You have to have like a qualifying time. I mean, you can run for charity and then you can run it that way, but like I want to do the qualifying time, and the qualifying time is tough.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, what do y'all like for question of the week? Suriel, leaning one way or the other?
I like when the question involves a lot of research. So the one about Dead Space Extraction.
Okay. Cree McGee, thank you so much for supporting MinnMax on Patreon. You just won the Baron Breakfast physical game on Switch thanks to I'm 8-Bit. All right, now it's time for everybody to get a load of this. So Suriel, this is where you share a factoid that blows our minds definitively. No way around it.
Okay, so last year I played through every Zelda game, and I started looking into like, what if Tears of the Kingdom goes for so long that I run out of other Zelda games to play? And one of the things that I found was that apparently someone made a remake of Zelda's Adventure, the CDI game.
Oh, okay.
In like a Game Boy Advance style, and that's just available to play. But I'm almost hesitant to post the link because it's like Nintendo will, send their snipers or whatever. But that's a fun thing that you can go look up because it like I saw the trailer for it. It's like, man, I should actually play this. This seems pretty cool.
I really thought, because you're going so hard into Zelda last year, like, well, surely the game that you're writing is going to be a Zelda style game. I guess there are shops in all the Zelda games, right? So it's kind of close. There's a classic Link's Awakening shopkeeper. He's maybe the most dynamic guy for electrocuting
all of the shopkeepers go, oh, thank you. That's my one Zelda reference.
We're going to need to differentiate these characters a little bit more, Mr. Vazquez, in your writing. We're looking at the analytics, and people don't like, oh, thank you for every character.
They keep yelling, how is the president standing?
So what's the name of the Zelda podcast again?
Every week I'm in tears.
That's awesome.
Such
And
a good name.
and it's still going?
No, it has concluded. I have talked about every Zelda game and Tears of the Kingdom in like a play-by-play kind of format where I will play as much as I can during the week and then talk about it. And it went for 27 episodes.
That's so sweet. And at the end of it, the top 2 Zelda games are?
I rank all of them. So it's like from worst to best.
Okay. Do you remember what the top 2 are?
The top 2?
Yeah.
I believe it's Breath of the Wild and Majora's Mask.
Majora's Mask number 1?
No, Breath of the Wild is number 1.
Okay.
And then Majora's.
Okay. Funky but good. Funky but good. I like it. Hey, get a load of this. I've been listening to a lot of the My Perfect Console podcast recently. Simon Parkin. It has a lot of great guests on there, like Katase, the original director for 7 and Chrono Trigger, was just on not too long ago, and it was a really great hour-long interview with him. But Josh Scher was on there from Naughty Dog. He was an animator at Naughty Dog for years and years and years and was a writer on their biggest games. And he split off now for Crop Circle Games. But he was breaking down his favorite games, the games that he would put on his perfect console, quote unquote. And I don't know how I've never heard of this game before. Jacob, have you ever heard of the game called A Mind Forever Voyaging?
No. It's
up your alley. So it's a text adventure game from 1985. And the premise is that you play as an AI and you're a simulation and you're taking a snapshot of society. And then the point of this AI is it's projecting 10 years into the future, and you play as that AI to experience life 10 years in the future to see how it all is shaking out. And then you go 20 years, then you go 30 years, 40 years. But the premise is it's all about the politics of Ronald Reagan. And
it's like the intro on Wikipedia. The introductory paragraph has 2 sentences. It's like, this is the game. The game was intended as a polemical critique of Ronald Reagan's politics.
It's parentheses, Jacob Geller, why aren't you playing this game right now?
The art is awesome.
The box art is awesome. It kind of looks like Reagan, but like with computer chips in his neck.
It kind of looks like I have no mouth and I must scream.
Yep. And so it was designed by Steve Moretsky, who also designed the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy text adventure game, which is one of my favorites ever. So somehow I need to play A Mind Forever Voyaging from 1985. And like, Jacob, do you think if we had like a narrator reading it off, do you think a text adventure could work for a New Show Plus option? Or is it going to be too weird?
I think it'd probably be too much text.
But if we had like
somebody... Brian Cox.
Okay, all right. Yeah. That could help, I think. I feel like there's a way to do it. It'd be funky, but we could do it as a podcast, I think, in some way. Okay, anybody else got one?
Get a load of this. Friend of MinnMax, Renata Price, who is on the Armored Core 6 Deepest Dive along with Suriel.
Yeah.
Wrote a piece on Balatro for inverse.com, worldwideweb.inverse.com. And it's just a great piece of writing on Balatro. The basic premise of it is that you are playing as the house. You know, it's like, and part of the way she frames it is like Balatro has been weirdly taken off storefronts because it's a gambling game.
Right.
You know, like it's not available on Switch anymore and whatever because they say it encourages gambling. And her point, which she writes about well in the article, but also has a tweet that I love. She's just said, if you used any of the lessons that Balatro teaches you in a casino, you would be killed instantaneously by 14 snipers. It is, in fact, tremendous instruction in how and why not to gamble, because wow, it turns out stacking the deck is both easy and fun. And so it's like her whole point is like, this is what the house is doing constantly. This is why you're always going to lose, is because they are able to do things with the deck that you will never be able to do. And so it's like, you know, I'm all in for Balatro. I'm thinking about it constantly, and I love her piece of writing about it.
That's sweet. Janet?
Yeah, get a load of this. I guess I'm down the rabbit hole of Steam meets like productivity products to some degree, but I found this I don't know if you want to call it a game or like a product. I guess they call it a like productivity, a gamified focus tool set. Focus tool is how they describe it. It's called Spirit City Lo-Fi. It's only available via demo right now, and I think it comes out in April. And it's just like lo-fi sessions, the game. You like make a little avatar, like a little lo-fi person. You can like sit at your laptop, like move around the room. They have like lo-fi music baked into it that you can play. It has like a Pomodoro tracker and like a to-do list and things. And I just like it as like, oh, this is another angle to sort of use tools that I've used before, but it kind of is a little bit nicer to look at. It maybe has like that video game layer to it in a sense. So I've been using that, and that's been fun.
Let's see. Hey, from the community, they get a lot of this channel in the Discord, which is the greatest news feed I can imagine. Marty Cicino shared this link from Eurogamer about the next Time Splitters game that was recently canceled. Thank you to Embracer Group. That somebody just uploaded 5 minutes of gameplay from this canceled Time Splitters game to LinkedIn, which is fun. Just like, hey, here you go, everybody. And there were like multiple versions of this Time Splitters thing, if you're following that story, where at first it was more of a Fortnite style game, and then it was a remake of Time Splitters 2, but like with extended stuff. But this footage that is up there is of like the Fortnite version of the reincarnation of Time Splitters. And it is so weird to see like a third person version of Time Splitters that just looks like Fortnite. But it's awesome that this footage is getting out there in some way, so we can see a glimpse of what is truly not to be. Hey, that's it for this episode of the MinnMax Show. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching and listening to this whole thing. Suriel, what would you like to plug, sir?
I'd like to plug the video game Merchants of Rosewall. You can wishlist it on Steam now, and yeah, join our Discord and have fun with folks who also like games like Merchants of Rosewall. We actually have a pretty sizable community already, so yeah. Make sure to hop on and check the game out when it comes out, Q3 2024.
Sweet. There's a link in the description if you want a direct link to Suriel's game. Let's see. We have a lot coming up here at MinnMax. And Janet, I haven't forgot about your plug. Trust me. But at MinnMax here, we have GDC. So like I mentioned, Haley and Janet and Leo and I are going to be heading out to San Francisco in the middle of March for GDC. And we're going to have the first ever San Francisco community meetup. If you really know your history, I'm talking like Suriel era, we were going to do a community meetup in March of 2020 at GDC, but something derailed that. I forget what it was. But now we're finally coming back. So if you want to come to the MinnMax community meetup in San Francisco, it is happening on Sunday, March 17th at 7 p.m. Pacific at a bar called Louie's in downtown San Francisco, not too far from the Moscone Center where GDC is. And you don't need to be a Patreon supporter to come. You're welcome to bring a friend. Just swing by, say hi, let us thank you in person for supporting MinnMax here if you do listen to the show or support us directly on Patreon. But whatever, it's going to be Sunday, March 17th at Louie's Bar at 7 p.m. Pacific. Come say hi. We'd love to meet you. Also, let's see, we have the deepest dive on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. You can unlock that in the bonus podcast feed, including a full-on spoilers discussion for the original Final Fantasy VII, because so many people were asking for that. So that's a Patreon exclusive now, where we talk about the first 4 chapters of Rebirth through the lens of the entirety of the original Final Fantasy VII. That's a Patreon exclusive there in that bonus podcast feed. And again, if you jump in at any tier before Friday, March 8th, or at the end of the day on Friday, March 8th, we will send you a code for Thirsty Suitors or an Xbox code. So thanks for supporting MinnMax on that front. Janet, what's going on?
Yeah, I was just going to plug my finally posted best of 2023.
Hell yeah.
The year goes on. Yeah, I wrote my top 10 list. Finally, I'd been working on it for quite some time over on my website, pen2pixels.com. It's www.pen2pixels.com. But yeah, give it a read. Check it out. It's a lot of, the titles we've talked about on the show before, but I finally actually put, pen to paper, digitally speaking, and got some more full thoughts on it. And with the extra time, I beat more of the games. So that was also a nice perk.
Yeah, sweet. Hey, do you know that if you join us at the $50 tier, you can become a game champion and choose any game under the sun, and we'll declare you its champion? Were you all aware of that?
I was, and I'll never forget it.
Well, here we go. We have Microsoft Flight Simulator. Their champion, of course, is hypeperformancegroup.com. Awesome pick, hypeperformancegroup.com for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Michael Berry chose Twisted, which is a Mario Party style trivia game on the 3DO, which looks so bad. I immediately sent it to Dan Riker. Like, this seems up your freaky alley. Joshua Ayers is Diabolical. They chose to be the game champion of Balatro. I love these people choosing new games. We'll see how it goes. Great picks all around. All right. I think that's it. Anybody else dying to say anything whatsoever?
Have y'all ever heard of the video game publisher Lost in Colt?
I've heard they're very cool and hip, but only partner with the coolest people around.
I don't know, maybe just like just check out their website, next couple days.
You're such a tease, Jacob Geller.
I know. We're teasing.
Yeah, this is the tease phase. Got it. All right. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching or listening. We'll see you back here next week. Thank you for supporting MinnMax. All right. Be good. Have fun. Let's go. Did you want to say that, Suriel?
Be good. Have fun. Let's go.
That was way better.